Good evening and welcome to the third session of our Plymouth Special Summer Town Meeting, being held live Tuesday, August 18, 2020 at 6 p.m. We're continuing to convene by remote participation pursuant to Chapter 92 of the Massachusetts Acts of 2020. Acting Town Clerk Pearl Sears has advised me that we now have a quorum of at least 90 elected town meeting members, and I therefore declare that a quorum being present, this Plymouth Annual Town Meeting will come to order at 6:01 p.m. Nicole Manfredi will once again serve as Assistant Town Moderator. Welcome, Nicole.
Welcome. Thank you. First, I just wanted to let town meeting members know if you're logged into this meeting in vVoter, I'm noticing that there are, once again, 3 Kevin Learys. And this is a result of 2 folks logging into the Zoom meeting using an old set of credentials. So I need you to take a peek at your the name that's listed in your Zoom profile. And if you notice that you're another Kevin Leary, we're going to need you to sign out and sign back in using the correct credentials, which is the email that was sent to you on Wednesday. Any questions? I'm watching the chat. So I'm pleased to report that at this point, other than the Kevin Leary glitch, we have had 0 calls to the help desk this evening, and no technical concerns. This speaks to the effectiveness of our extensive training and the willingness of town meeting members to embrace this virtual model. Once again, we have a small number of town meeting members that are participating from Plymouth North High School with socially distanced technical support provided by the students of Plymouth North High School. As always, if a town meeting member has a technical issue at any time throughout this meeting, they are encouraged to call the help desk and we will address this immediately. Any parliamentary questions or concerns must be indicated through the vVoter system.
Thank you, Nicole Manfredi. She is the Assistant Town Moderator, and as we mentioned at the end of our last session in an email that you received since then, based on the records from OTI and the voting performance of town meeting members, we will be having the votes for 30 seconds, and we will determine whether that's going to work well this evening. We have many motions under Article 9. We once again welcome Mark Rich of Coltman and Page, who will continue to serve as town counsel throughout tonight's session of town meeting. Welcome, Attorney Rich. Julie Thompson is the executive director of PAC TV, and she joins us in the studio with 2 representatives from OTI Technologies. Together, PAC TV and OTI will continue to support our Zoom webinar and the vVoter platforms throughout town meeting. Now, according to our town charter, Chapter 2, Section 5, Subsection 2, the town clerk keeps a record of attendance, and pursuant to the next subsection, a representative town meeting member who cannot attend a session shall provide written notice to the town clerk. I believe we've been notified as to 4 town meeting members who will be absent, 1 who will be late. Anyone wishing to inquire as to reasons given for town meeting absence should check with the town clerk. Now, pursuant to the Charter, Chapter 2, Section 10, Subsection 2, representative town meeting members shall notify the town clerk in writing prior to the town meeting session as to any articles that give rise to a financial conflict of interest. Town meeting members are also reminded that the vVoter platform includes an option to abstain if needed. Now, at this time, I'd like to clarify the use of a point of order and the issue of conflicts of interest under our town charter. A point of order is generally a question to be referred to a moderator for resolution, as opposed to a motion on a matter before the meeting. Now, in reference to the conflict of interest section of our town charter, while the charter has sought to impose a stricter standard than that found under state statute, it is a standard for which there is no mechanism for enforcement. And while the moderator by statute presides over and regulates the conduct of town meeting, the moderator does not have the authority to enforce the conflict of interest provision of our charter, as such enforcement may intrude upon the constitutional rights of town meeting members. This is the reason I bring the charter provision to the attention of town meeting members at the start of every session of town meeting, and why I'm bringing it to your attention this evening. Each town meeting member is responsible for her or his own conduct with respect to potential conflicts of interest. It's self-policing, and I leave that to each of you to police yourselves. While the issue may be raised during debate, it is simply not a proper point of order, as there is no action the moderator can take in response. Therefore, while I acknowledge the concern raised with town meeting members voting on matters in which they have a financial interest, I cannot take any action in that regard, and so I cannot recognize this as a proper point of order. This issue having been raised by a town meeting member, I do feel obliged to remind each of you of the standard of conduct to which you should hold yourselves. Please keep conflicts of interest in mind when you vote on any article in which you may have a financial interest, and consider abstaining if you believe you have a conflict of interest. Now, in accordance with Section 8A8 of the enabling state statute for a virtual town meeting, registered voters residing in the town wishing to participate in a remote town meeting shall submit a written request to the town clerk not less than 48 hours in advance of the town meeting session. Upon receipt of the request, the clerk shall verify the requesting voter's registration status. This evening, we will recess within 2 hours from the start of this meeting as provided in our charter. Mr. Canty moves that an adjourned session of this town meeting be held remotely on Wednesday, August 19 at 6 p.m. I do not see any requests to speak on this motion, so we're going to call up on the screen and provide everyone with an opportunity. You'll also get to see the roll by the vote for this adjourned session. And when we have the timer up on the screen, we're going to begin to vote. The timer is going to be changed tonight from the 45 to 30. So when the voting begins, you'll have 30 seconds in which to vote. And we're going to start the voting now for 30 seconds. You can begin. So town meeting members are voting on whether to have an adjourned session tomorrow night if we do not finish action on all of the remaining articles on the annual town meeting warrant. Town meeting members have the opportunity to vote yes, no, or abstain. And after they vote, we're going to go through the precincts to see who's here this evening and who voted for the adjourned session. They're finishing their votes. The voting is now completed, and we'll have totals that'll show up on the screen. The totals for this vote show 88 in favor, 13 say no, and 1 abstention. It passes. And you'll see that we're showing on the screen, beginning with precincts 1, 2, and 3, those people who are here, who are voting, and those as to how they voted. And you'll note that we have over 100 town meeting members participating this evening at town meeting. And we're at precincts 7, 8, and 9. And again, as with last week, we're not going to be scrolling through the precincts on procedural motions, nor will we if we have a unanimous vote, in order to try to move town meeting along. And that completes precincts 13, 14, and 15. And it now brings us back to where we left off with our last session of the annual town meeting. And that was with Article 9, and we have a motion from Mr. Canty. He moves that the sum of, the town appropriate the sum of $5,352, $658, I'm sorry, $5,352,658 to pay costs of various capital projects listed as A1 through A57. So we have a main motion under the A group and a main motion under the B group. And this is as set forth in the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. We're going to hear from Mr. Canty at this time. He's the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, and thereafter I'll explain how we're going to debate and vote under Article 9. Mr. Canty, welcome to this session of town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee reconsidered and amended its original recommendation on this article at its July 8th, 2020 meeting, and in a vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this article as amended. The amended recommendation incorporates a net decrease of $589,490 to the committee's original recommendation. The amended spreadsheet for this particular article can be located in the Supplement 1 document that all town meeting members have received.
He is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Now, it would be possible to go and take a vote now on all of the A items. However, I received multiple motions to divide. Normally, we would vote on the motions to divide, except that some of the motions affected the motion made by a different town meeting member. And as we went through, it seemed that in order to expedite this, the simplest way to do it would be to go through the spreadsheet, take up those items on which we've been notified in advance that there may be disagreement, debate those items, take a vote, and then we'll vote all the remaining items in Article 9. So we're going to begin with the items, and we'll take some of them on separate votes. First, A1, I'm not seeing anyone looking to speak. So next we're going to go to A2, and we're going to call on Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti, and this has to do with the town building repair program. And the amount, Mr. Malaguti moves the town repair program be reduced by $50,000 to $352,000. Mr. Malaguti, on your motion to amend. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My motion to amend reducing the original appropriation by $50,000 is based upon prior appropriations during the town building program from prior town meetings that's still remaining in Burke's Law in unfunded, in unused accounts that have been in there for multiple years. It is not an effort to reduce any upkeep or required maintenance to buildings. It's just a way of helping clean up the books a little, as well as saving some taxpayer dollars that could be used for another purpose in a prior year.
Thank you. And that's Everett Malaguti on his motion to amend. I would like to restate the main motion. The amount, in fact, is $9,052,232. That's on the main motion. We now have discussion on Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend, and if there's no further discussion, we're now going to take a vote on the motion to amend. And this is to reduce item 2 by $50,000. We're going to call up on the screen for town meeting members to vote on whether to reduce item 2 by $50,000 based on the motion. And we're going to be looking, this is a motion to amend item A2. We're going to look for the timer, 30 seconds. You can begin voting now. Town meeting members are voting on whether or not to reduce A2 by $50,000 to $352,000. It's a majority vote on whether or not to amend this item, and we're going to take a look at how a town meeting member votes on this first substantive motion vote for the evening. It's to reduce Article 9A, item A2. The voting has ended, and we're now going to see how the votes have been cast by town meeting members who are voting. We'll show the results on the screen, and 69 say yes, 41 say no, 2 abstentions. The motion carries. So we've now got under item A2 a change, and it's going to be $352,000. So at the end, absent any other changes, we'll get a final vote on the amount for town meeting to be voting under this, and it'll be reduced by $50,000. We're going to go to item A3, and I'm not seeing any requests. Item A4, the building code, no requests. We're going to go to item A5, and on item A5, we're going to call on Paul Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham on item A5. Mr. Cunningham,
Very much, Mr. Moderator. I assume this was written in case the $3 million funds were not voted for the fire headquarters and the 2 other stations and paving them. Of course, it makes no sense to pave them right now before we do renovations with a lot of heavy duty equipment going in there. But this would also seem to be covered by the $3 million we voted on to recommend the various changes and the paving of each individual station. That was for a reason for voting to drop this 550,000.
And so, Mr. Cunningham, you're requesting that the town not fund this?
Yes, sir.
So we're going to give you an opportunity to vote this particular item. So we're going to call up on the screen for item A5, and we're going to take a vote whether to approve item A5 or whether or not to not approve it. Before we do that, I do see people on the screen. So I'm going to hold off on the vote. I'm first going to take a couple of points of order. First point of order I see is Precinct 10, Alan Costello. Mr. Costello, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, town meeting members. Yeah, I was trying to stop you and get back to A4. The most current information I have.
Mr. Costello, I'll
question.
come back to A4 if you want to come to that. Let's finish with A5. I'll come back to you.
Thank you, sir.
Nathan Siegel, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to clarify, would you mind clarifying the vote here? So does a no vote reduce this line item to 0?
Yes. Yeah, a no vote would be to reduce it to 0. A yes vote would be to fund the 550. So we're giving Mr. Cunningham an opportunity to have this particular item voted up or down.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're now going to go to people who have asked to speak on the motion, but first, again, another point of order for Wrestling Brewster, Precinct 5, on a point of order. Mr. Brewster.
Yes, Wrestling Brewster, Precinct 5. I think we need a little more clarification. I believe that Mr. Cunningham's motion, if you approve the motion, it is taken out. You just said if we said yes, it stays in. I think we need a little clarification on that, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. He did not make a motion. He wanted to make a motion, but you don't make a motion to vote 0. You either, the main motion is to fund 550. Mr. Cunningham is opposed, so he can vote no. So I correctly stated that a yes vote will be to fund the 550. A no vote would be to not fund it. And rather than...
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to have people who want to speak on the motion. And I'm going to begin with Precinct 3, Dale Weber. Welcome, Mr. Weber. And on this motion, good evening. Dale Weber is Precinct 3. He has speaking privileges, and he'll unmute himself.
I think I just clicked on that to
Yes,
unmute
we
myself.
can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening.
Good evening.
Dale Weber, Precinct 3. I would like town meeting to consider funding this as there's an issue here with the DPW annex building that's lumped into this article. And that is an issue that the town administration, as well as the DPW Safety Committee, has recommended the paving of the back lot, currently a gravel lot, to the back entry of the DPW annex facility, tracking in dirt and dust to the building, and then the air circulation unit kicks all that dust around into the building and creates hazards. There has been reports of asbestos-containing material that has been used in the past in the grading materials of that back lot, and this would effectuate an encapsulation of that product and put this issue to rest. So I would hope that town meeting would consider turning down the motion to amend this and pass it as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Town Manager Melissa Arrighi to further respond to the representations in connection with this matter. Welcome, Town Manager Melissa Arrighi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator and town meeting members. We would really ask that you support this item tonight. These parking lots need to be paved. We've had multiple firefighters be injured in the parking lots. In addition, I would agree with Mr. Weber that we need to do the DPW annex as well. So please support this. Let us get these parking lots done. Mr. Cunningham, this funding was not included in the articles that were passed the other evening.
Thank you. We're going to continue going to Precinct 12, Joseph Hutchinson, who's asked to speak on the motion. Good evening, Mr. Hutchinson, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just canceled my request based on Melissa's statement.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 15. Kevin Joyce moves to close debate. We're going to show the queue. We'll take Mr. Joyce off of the queue, and we're going to show the queue. You'll see there's one town meeting member that still wished to be heard. We're now going to take a vote on whether to close debate. This is a procedural vote, requires 2/3. Town meeting members are deciding whether to continue to debate item A5. We're going to call this up on the screen, and once we have it, we're going to look for the timer, 30 seconds, and you can start voting now. Town meeting members voting whether to end debate on item 9A5, and that is a request for $550,000 for the town building repair program. And town meeting members are in their first 2 hours of the third session of this annual town meeting, coming to you live from PAC TV studio. We're seeing the voting going down, and we're through now on whether to close debate. We need a 2/3 vote. We're going to see the vote. 91 in favor, 20 vote no, 2 abstaining. The motion carries. We're not going to scroll through the precincts. We're going to go right now to the substantive motion under 9A5. This is again a vote on whether to approve $550,000. A yes is to approve the Finance Committee recommendation, and a no would be to not approve it. We're going to look for the timer, start voting now. Town meeting members have 30 seconds in which to vote on 9A, item A5. Following the voting, we'll go back to A4. We had a request from Precinct 10, Alan Costello. We'll be going to him when the voting ends. But after we get a chance to see what the total vote is for A5, as well as how town meeting members voted. So the voting is now complete. We're now going to see what the quantum of vote. So 89 voted in favor, 22 in opposition, 3 abstentions. The motion carries. Town meeting has approved A5. We're going to scroll through the precincts. As we scroll through the precincts, town meeting members can look to make sure their vote was correctly recorded. And while we do that, I'd like to go now to Precinct 10, town meeting member Alan Costello. Good evening once again, Mr. Costello. We'll continue to scroll through the precincts as Mr. Costello will listen to your request.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Alan Costello, Precinct 10. I was trying to stop you on 4A. My latest paperwork has a dollar value of $60,500. Has that since been changed, sir?
No, it has not. That's the amount, $60,500.
So did we just skip over that? I thought you said there was no request.
So what we're doing, Mr. Costello, is in advance, I've received a number of requests from town meeting members seeking to either reduce the recommended amount from the Advisory and Finance Committee or to vote in opposition. So I'm taking all of those and we're voting them separately. And then after we vote those items separately, we'll vote all of the rest of the remaining items as a bundle. But as we go through, if someone wishes to vote in opposition on any item or wishes to reduce it, I'll take that up. So do you have a request under item A4?
I do not at this time. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. We're going to go to item A6. And again, This is to replace the steel entry doors, DPW Highway, 53,600. And we're going to go to Precinct 1, Everett, Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti, you requested that you be heard on this. Initially, your request was to divide. I've divided this already, so now you can speak. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My objective in this is similar to the majority of my motions on Article 9, is because there's still ample funding within Burke's Law. This is not taking out money that is needed to repair any of these buildings for safety or maintenance needs that are overdue. It's just helping to clean up the books as well as save taxpayers some money. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Malaguti, you do not have a motion. You just seek to oppose this item, as I understand it. And so 53,600. I do see two people requesting to be heard. We're going to begin with Precinct 4, John Hammond on A6. Mr. Hammond, good evening.
Good evening. I was wondering, when Mr. Malaguti looks for funding from Burke's Law, I'd like to know from the town management how that affects their overall budget and whether they have sufficient funds in free cash to do that.
I'm going to go to Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance. We've got a question from town meeting member John Hammond. He's in Precinct 4. And good evening, Lynne Barrett.
Good evening, moderator and town meeting members. So the motion is still to fund this particular project from free cash. Everett has not made a motion to amend the funding source, at least not on this one. He has made amendments on other ones that we'll speak to. But for right now, this particular project's being recommended to fund from free cash.
Thank you. And now,
would it be out of order to ask about the other projects now?
Yes, it would be.
This is coming up again.
Yes, you could speak on further items. Right now, we're debating item A6, and we're going to go to Precinct 8, Catherine Holmes. Good evening, Catherine Holmes.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, the host muted me. Okay. Okay, so can someone clarify a little further for me what it means when Everett's referring to cleaning up Burke's Law for projects? My understanding is that those projects are in there that were dedicated revenues for other projects. Is he saying that those projects didn't get done, or is there extra cash in those projects? Could someone clarify so we can have a little bit of better understanding?
So again, we'll go back to the Director of Finance, Lynne Barrett, in response to a question from Catherine Holmes. Good evening once again.
Okay, good evening. So in the blue book that all town meeting members got on pages 25 to 34, there was a bylaw that got voted several years ago where every year at town meeting, we have to give a report on all projects, capital projects, non-borrowing ones. Give a report to town meeting on what was appropriated, what's been spent, and what the balances are. And so what Everett has done is he goes through that report, he looks at balances, and he is saying that there are funding sources available in these old articles. However, what we do internally with the departments is we ask the departments every year if they plan on spending this money for the specific project that it was voted for, because you can't use it on anything else unless you go back to town meeting. So a lot of these projects balances that are still in the Burke's Law are still being used by those departments to finish those particular projects. There are ones that we will be closing out the end of fiscal 20 as we do our closeout process. So some of those may be sitting in that report that was in this book as of April, but we would identify those as we go along. If Everett has identified a couple that I am going to allow him to use tonight, but one of them I am not because it plans on being used. So that's what he's referring to when he refers to Burke's Law.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm familiar with the
Catherine
Brooks
Holmes.
law. I'm confused by when he's saying that he would want to reduce the amount because there's funding without knowing specifically and getting a commitment from the town that they don't need that money in this specific fund. I would be apprehensive to vote to reduce it. So what's for this specific one?
So Catherine
Is there-
Holmes, the vote
He has
before
not
you,
identified a funding source for this one. He has not identified one.
Okay, no identified source.
No.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So we have no other requests for speakers. We're going to go to vote now on item A6. A yes vote would be to fund the Finance Committee recommendation of $53,600. A no would be to not fund it. It's on your screen, and 30 seconds now. You can begin to vote. Town meeting members are voting on item A6 under Article 9A, and town meeting members are in their third session. And again, this is coming to you live from a number of locations. There are a group of us here at PAC TV Studios. I'm joined by the Assistant Town Moderator from the Town Council, from Julie Thompson, PAC TV, and 2 members from OTI. We also have people at Town Hall on our panel. The voting has ended. We're now going to see the total on the votes. 79 in favor, 30 say no, 1 abstention. It's a majority vote. It passes. We're going to scroll through the precincts so that town meeting members can see whether their vote was correctly recorded, and also those of you watching the public can see how your town meeting member voted. As we do that, we're going to move on to item A7, and I'm going to read into the record a motion to amend. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, moves the town vote to reduce the appropriation under the town building repair program by $20,000 to $20,000. So the original request was $40,000, and he moves to amend that. Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti, on your motion to amend. Good evening. We're going to give
Good
speaking.
evening.
Good evening.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. Sorry, the unmute was a little delayed. The same comment goes for the other ones. This one, if I can provide a little bit of clarification, this one, when I was looking at Burke's Law for this one, it was a little bit of the building repair program existing funds in Burke's Law, as well as some of the money from a previous article of repairing the animal shelter, which was my rationale for reducing some of the funding of this article. Thank you.
Yes, and we're now going to go to Dennis Wood, and he's going to speak in response to this motion to amend. Good evening, Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood is on our panel, and he is one of the panelists at the Great Hall in Town Hall, and he's going to be speaking on behalf of the Department of Public Works. And again, this is the Town Building Repair Program, and is an HVAC energy recovery unit for the animal shelter. We have people at Town Hall in the Great Hall. We also have people at Plymouth North High School receiving one-on-one support. And Mr. Hall.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dennis Wood, Assistant DPW Director, Plymouth. How are you doing this evening? I just wanted to talk about this HVAC. This is actually an upgrade that we learned that we need to install. The energy recovery unit accommodating the rear dog kennel area of the building. This HVAC is not to code. We're getting gases into the office area from the kennel area. And this is why these upgrades need to be done. And we had the price of $40,000 to do this repair, what's needed.
Thank you. That was Dennis Worth, Assistant Director, Department of Public Works. Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy. Good evening, Ms. McCarthy.
Thank you. It sounds to me like you need the 40,000 to complete the project and that it's a safety issue. So I believe that the 40,000 should remain. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further other speakers. We're now going to go to vote on the motion to amend item A7. We're going to call that up. Before we do that, we've got a couple other people who have asked to speak. So we're going to hold on the vote, and we're going to go to Brigitte Keene, in Precinct 15. Precinct 15, we'd like to welcome Brigitte and provide her with speaking privileges. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and town meeting members. This is Brigitte Keene, Precinct 15. I would like just to have some clarification from Mr. Malaguti and, if necessary, from Lynne Barrett. Has Mr. Malaguti said that there will be 40,000 available because 20,000 is currently available in another account that can be transferred from the Burke's Law? I know that we've been asking sort of around this question, and I'm still slightly confused. If you could clarify. Thank you.
Yes, and I just want to note that I understand that Catherine Holmes voted yes in the last vote and rather than abstain, which it was recorded as. We're going to go to Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, followed by Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, responding to Brigitte Keene. Mr. Malaguti.
Yes, Everett Malaguti. And to Brigitte's question, that's absolutely correct. My notion is that there is ample funds from what I have available to find that the full 40 will be in play. It's just a reduction of it being taken from free cash and being used with funds available in Burke's Law.
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, further responding to Brigitte Keene. Good evening.
So the funds that Everett is referring to are for the animal shelter, but they are for other maintenance items to the animal shelter, not for this air conditioning. So the motion to reduce would actually take away money from the repair that Mr. Wood was referring to.
Thank you. And we're now going to go to Precinct 12, Betsy Hall. And while we're connecting her, I've been asked to explain what a yes and no vote is. A yes would be to reduce item A7 to 20,000. And that's because we're voting on a motion to amend. A no would be to keep it at the 40,000. So a yes is for 20,000, a no is for 40. Good evening, Precinct 15, Michael Hanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm a little confused by Mr. Malaguti's proposal, but I'm looking at page 30 in that book, Burke's Law section of the book, and he may be referring to an appropriation back in April of 2016 to repair animal shelter for $21,000. That was appropriated 4 years ago, and according to this, not one penny of that money was spent. So I guess I'm asking Mr. Malaguti the question is that where he's getting the $20,000 from? But also the gentleman who spoke a few minutes ago about the project, I would ask, you've got $21,000 to repair the animal shelter from 4 years ago, but it apparently hasn't been spent. So how does the math work out on this?
Again, further responding, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, on your motion to amend. Everett Malaguti is a town meeting member in Precinct 1. He has a motion to amend. Mr. Malaguti.
Sorry about that. The unmute was delayed. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. Mr. Hanlon actually is correct on that. That was my original cue, was to look at that funding that was available 4 years ago that had not been spent yet. And that was my rationale when I first created it.
Thank you. We have a motion to close debate. Michael Landers, Precinct 13, moves to close debate. We're going to show the speaker's queue. And when you see the queue, you'll see we see one person who wants to speak. We're now going to do this procedural motion, whether to close the debate. This is to close debate on the motion to amend. When you see it on the screen, it's to close the debate on A7, motion to amend. 30 seconds. The timer will begin and show voting now. Town meeting members have 30 seconds in which to vote on both the procedural and the substantive motions. They're using a V-voter platform, which allows them to expedite their voting. And town meeting members are going to continue in the annual town meeting under Article 9, and we're on item A7. We have a total of 57 items to complete in the A group. They've now completing the voting. It's done. This is to close debate. We're now going to see the total. Requires a 2/3 vote, 89 in favor, 24 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion carries. We're not going to scroll through its procedure. We're going to go right now to the motion to amend. I'm seeing a point of order from Betsy Hall. So Precinct 12, Betsy Hall has a point of order. Good evening, Betsy Hall.
Hi, Steve. How are you this evening?
Yes, very good.
I'm doing my point of order because you called on me and I got an unmute button and then I unmuted and then you said Michael Hanlon from Precinct 15 would like to speak, but you originally called on me before you called on Michael Hanlon and before the point of order to close debate.
Go ahead.
I'd like to speak on the main motion.
Okay, speak on the, well, no, we're speaking on the motion to amend.
Okay, I'll speak on the motion to amend.
Okay.
What I would like to do is I would like to find out from the town side, what's happening at the animal shelter? Are there any animals there? Have there been animals there recently? What is the activity going on at the animal shelter at this time, please?
Thank you. And we're going to go to Melissa Arrighi. She's our town manager, and she can determine which official will speak to this. Melissa Arrighi.
I can actually speak to the animal shelter. Certainly there is activity there. We have a group of employees that still works out of there. There's the temporary repair to what Denny Wood was talking to you about, which in terms of any of the fumes coming from the HVAC system. We did repairs there not too long ago. There was actually a pretty extensive project done under David Gould. That's where the department falls under. And there are, I think last time I checked, there were quite a few cats there, a couple birds. I don't recall about any dogs, but it's still a very active animal shelter.
Thank you. All right, and we're now going to go to the vote. We've closed debate on this motion to amend. Again, a yes vote would be to reduce to 20,000. A no vote would be to keep the Finance Committee recommendation of 40,000. You'll see you have 30 seconds in which to vote now. Town meeting members are voting on Article 9, Item A7, motion to amend from Everett Malaguti. He's moving to cut the main motion in half to 20,000 from the original recommendation of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Thereafter, town meeting members will continue to debate the 57 items in Article 9 in the A group. And you'll see that the votes are continuing and it's completed. And now we're going to see the total. And the total that we see, 44 voting in favor, 70 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion does not carry, and therefore we're going with the 40,000. A8, and we see that that is for town building repair, exterior trim, Memorial Hall, 53,000. Again, Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti on A8. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. So for the town building repair program for the exterior trim painting for Memorial Hall at $53,000, my request for reducing that is based on 2 prior articles for Memorial Hall that had finished their usefulness as the entire replacement process was done roughly 7 to 10 years ago for the upholstering of chairs in Memorial Hall, as well as the finished installation of the new generator, which both of those still had funds left over, and that was what I was using for my recommendation for reducing this. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the last vote, Catherine Krampf indicates that her Wi-Fi is shaky, but her vote is yes. At this time, we're going to go to Dennis Wood. He is on our panel. He is the Assistant Director for the Department of Public Works. Welcome, Dennis Wood.
Good evening again. I just wanted to speak on this to let you know that the numbers that we got for these again was the full amount to do the painting that's coming from our analysis from our software that we have and previous quotes. And the jobs that Everett is speaking on, I believe, is still got a few things left to do on it. So I don't know if those are totally closed out. I can't speak on that. Maybe Lynne could, but I believe there's still some stuff to be done on those. So that's why I think those money's there. But the money that everything that we're asking for, we need the full amount to get these projects done.
Thank
That's
you. Any further discussion on A8? If not, we're going to take a vote on this. A yes vote is to fund the $53,000. A no vote is to not fund the recommendation of $53,000. You'll see the voting begins now. You're voting on item A8, and again, a yes vote is to approve the recommendation of $53,000. A no vote would be to zero fund A8. Town meeting members have time in which to vote. The vote time is coming down. Again, we have people throughout the town of Plymouth and town meeting members outside of Plymouth participating remotely through this virtual town meeting. The voting has ended, and on A8, we're going to see the totals: 80 voting in favor, 35 in opposition, 0 abstentions, and therefore this is funded under A8. We're now going to go to, I see Mr. Malaguti did have a motion to amend. However, we have voted to approve the full $53,000. Let me go back to Mr. Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti, do you still care to make your motion to amend now, seeing the vote of town meeting members?
Mr. Trifiletti, I was actually going to post a point of order because that is basically what the article intended, was the motion, not a vote on that article.
I see. So you were not requesting that it be a zero fund. You wanted reduced by 20,000.
It was a reduction.
Okay. And do you, after seeing the vote of 80 to 35, do you still wish to make your motion?
Yes, I still wish to make the motion, as I believe there was a little bit of confusion when people were voting. It's not to zero out the account, it's to use available funds in Burke's Law to acquire a portion of the funding for the project.
So we're going to go now and consider, and I've checked with town council, because this was printed in the paperwork, because Mr. Malaguti did want the opportunity to make a motion to amend. We're going to take that motion to amend under Article A8. And before we go to that, Donna Curtin, Precinct 3, has a point of order. Donna Curtin, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Donna Curtin, Precinct 3. My point of order is exactly what you were discussing, and I was just going to request, if you didn't rerun the vote on the motion to amend, that I changed my vote, because I voted according to what was written in the book and not with your verbal instructions.
Thank
so
you.
If we're
Thank
going
you.
to rerun the vote, thank you.
So we're going to now, unless anyone else wants to vote, we're going to now vote on Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend, and he's seeking to reduce A8 by 20,000 to 33,000. So again, a yes vote for this particular one would be to approve 33,000. A no vote would be to keep the 53,000. So you have the motion to amend, and you can start voting now. Again, a yes is to reduce by 20,000 to 33,000. A no vote is to keep it at the 53,000. So again, we have these motions to amend, and you need to decide whether you do want to amend or whether you want to go with the vote of the Finance Committee. And we are debating under Article 9, A8. And the voting is winding down. Town meeting members have completed the voting, and we'll see whether or not they approve the motion to amend. 51 say yes, let's amend, but 59 say no. Let's keep with the Finance Committee. So we're going to keep with that. We're going to scroll with the precincts, and A8 stays intact at 53,000. As we scroll through the precincts, we're looking at A9, school building repair. We're looking at A10, which is school building repair, A11, school building repair, A12, school building repair, and A13, school building repair, as we continue to be scrolling through the precincts. And we're going to be coming to A14. And A14, we have a recommendation from Advisory and Finance Committee to fund $145,044, and we're going to call on Paul Cunningham, town meeting member, who wishes to be heard on A14. Good evening, Mr. Cunningham. He has speaking privileges.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. The school department's only contribution to the budget cutting so far of $1.9 million has been restored through a reconsideration motion. And so basically they have no skin in the game, as people say. And they currently have 12 requests totaling $1,435,954. And this is just an attempt to have every department participate in bringing this budget under control now that we know what the situation is with this COVID-19. So these were requested in the regular order of business prior to COVID-19, and said every department should give back something. In the interest of full disclosure, it should receive that Plymouth County provided to the school department $225 per student times 7,000.
Mr. Cunningham, we're going to stay with capital projects under Article 9, A14. We've finished Article 7 in the school budget. So if you could direct your remarks to the capital proposal.
But that is the reason why I recommended that we not approve this item. There's 12 items in there, and I've pointed out 3 of them. This is one that that they should contribute to us cutting the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gary Maestas responding on A14.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have a number of projects that have been that have made Article 9. These projects have been on our radar for quite some time. The Article 9, which is relative to, the Article A14, which is window replacement, is for windows at West Elementary School. We do have a process of trying to keep our buildings up. The windows at West Elementary and also at Federal Furnace Elementary are the original windows from 1972. They are in disrepair, some don't work. And every item that is on the school department docket tonight is relative to items that we believe need to be repaired because they are in disrepair and are of safety and also of significant concern for weather conditions and things of that nature. So I appreciate Mr. Cunningham's approach and looking at how we can all share in what we are dealing with COVID. But I will say that in the school department, we have many challenges ahead in the year to come and in the years to come regarding offering of education in our town of Plymouth. But I will also mention that a lot of these repair items have been put off for years, and they have made the list because they are a priority for the town and actually, brought to you by the school department. So I do appreciate the comment, but again, we have a great deal of challenge moving forward.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 8, Donald Williams, and we're also going to announce Andy Lorette said his vote on the last amend was not recorded. He voted yes. Karen Edwards indicates computer problems. Karen, please call the help desk. We're now going to go to Precinct 8, Donald Williams. Good evening, Donald Williams.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, town meeting representatives. I think as a guideline for going through this list that we should consider which ones of these capital requests could be reasonably put off until the next, at least, budget session, perhaps the next year. I think that everybody can make a case for the validity of all of these. I think that the case needs to be made for whether it could be put off or not. I would urge that we switch the emphasis a little bit. and address the issue of whether this is something that is absolutely necessaries or not. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, we're going to now go to Michael Brennan. He moves to close debate. It is not debatable. We're showing people on the screen who wanted to speak on the motion. And now you're going to see on your screen whether or not town meeting wants to close debate on A14. You don't have a motion, so it's really a question of, do you want to vote yes or no? There is first whether we stop debating. We're going to show the timer. You can vote now. This is to vote as to whether to end debate on A14. A14, it is 14 out of 57 items in the A group. We have 3 items in the B group, a total of 60 items, and we are at 14. You're going to continue to determine whether to close debate. It is not a debatable motion. Town meeting members need a 2/3 vote into whether close debate and now move to the motion from the Finance Committee. And the results are 90 in favor, 25 against, 0 abstentions. It carries. We've closed debate. We're now going to vote on A14. A yes is to fund Finance Committee recommendation of 145,044. A no vote is not to fund it. Town meeting members are going to see the opportunity to vote on the screen, and when it comes up, you'll have 30 seconds. So we're looking for A14. Here we go. We're looking for the timer. Vote now. You're voting on A14. A yes is 145,044. A no is 0 on this particular capital outlay recommendation. Town meeting members, after they complete this vote, will be moving to A15. Town meeting is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. We are participating remotely, and the voting on this is ending now. You're going to see the totals, and 94 vote in favor, 23 in opposition, 1 abstention. It carries. We're going to scroll through the precincts, but as we do, we're going to be looking at A15. And again, this is a request for window replacements, phase 1, $118,184. We're going to go to Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham. Once again, good evening, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. For those town meeting members who wonder about deferring the right items, I have no clue as to which items are rated in the priority scale. But the school department has the unique ability to shift resources around and demonstrated that with last year with about a quarter of the school year turned to remote learning. All the expenses related to transportation, cleaning schools, layoffs, and janitorial help only returned $72,000 to the general fund, while the town returned $4.6 million. So I just picked some items, and they contribute this as a department thing towards reducing the budget. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Gary Maestas, Superintendent of Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to clarify that the school department returned over $3 million at the end of the school year last year due to unexpended funds due to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 10, Brian Fitzgerald, who wants to speak on the motion. Good evening, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. My point is simple. This particular item is for replacing windows. We're in the middle of an aerosol-driven pandemic. Plymouth is somewhat unique in bringing students back into the school buildings. If there is a better time to take care of the movement of air within buildings to prevent children from leaving the schools in an infectious or sick state, I don't know what it is. So I would urge full funding for the replacement of these windows because there is no better time to take care of this nature of repair than right now. Thank you.
And is this Precinct 7 Michael Brennan? No, Mr. Fitzgerald. We're going to go to Precinct 7 Michael Brennan. He moves to close debate. It's not debatable. It requires a 2/3 vote. We're going to show the screen. You'll see there were 2 people that wanted to speak. We're now going to vote on whether to close debate on A15. You'll see it called up on the screen. It's a 2/3 vote. And we're going to take the vote once we see it on the screen. And with the 30 seconds, we're waiting. You can vote now. This is a procedural vote. Town meeting members are deciding whether or not to close debate on item A15. They have 60 items on which to vote under Article 9. This would be 1/4 of the items in Article 9, and we are 1 hour into our third session of town meeting. Town meeting members are voting whether to close debate, and we are on item A15, whether to close debate on this item. Town meeting members are voting. It requires a 2/3 vote. We're now going to look at the vote, and it's 108 say yes, 10 say no, 0 abstentions. It's procedural. We're not going to scroll through. We're going to go right to the main substantive motion on A15. Again, a yes vote is to fund to do the window replacements, $118,184. A no would be to fund 0. Town meeting members will vote when you see it on the screen, along with the timer. We're waiting for the timer. They have 30 seconds in which to vote. When the timer shows on the screen, you can vote now. They're voting on A15. Again, 118,184 is a yes. 0 would be a no. And town meeting members are now voting on A15 in Article 9. We're completing the first hour of our third session, and we are 1/4 through the 60 items under Article 9. Town meeting members will continue to debate the remaining articles in the annual town meeting warrant. They've also voted another adjourned session for tomorrow evening if they don't finish. The voting has ended. We're going to look at the results. 94 in favor, 20 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion carries for the funding. A16, we do not have any requests. A17, no requests. A18, no requests. You're seeing the precinct votes for A15. A18, no requests. A19, no requests. And A20, no requests. So we're now going to go to A21, and we're going to recognize Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham, as we scroll through the precincts on A15. Mr. Cunningham on A21. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. I wish to say no more. It appears the town meeting members want to vote everything on the budget, into the budget, see how deep it can get. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Cunningham, do you want to vote on this A15? Mr. Cunningham?
I thought we moved on from A15.
A21, I'm sorry. Did you want to vote on A21?
No, I'm going to abstain.
Well, again, you originally moved to divide to have this treated separately. Would you like a separate vote on A21, or shall I move on?
You can move on as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. We're going to move to A22. And do we have Stacy Dela Cruz with us this evening? I know Stacy was going to be delayed. And I don't think Stacy is here yet. So we're going to move on. A23 is highway replacement. Again, we're going to go to Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham, do you care to be heard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. The town vehicle category requested 11 items totaling $993,761. And in this unusual situation, never before experienced in 100 years, we're attempting to trim and postpone some items until the town finds out what the state and federal government is going to do to help. Many of these equipment items can be rented in unique situations for 1 or 2 days. And as anyone knows that has attended the Capital Request Committee, they don't even keep track of when they're looking for a specialized product or a vehicle. So that's the way to find out, rent what you need until we find out more about where we're going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dennis Wood is the Assistant Director for the Department of Public Works. Welcome, Dennis Wood, in response to item A23. Dennis Wood. Good evening. This is Plymouth Town Meeting.
Good evening again.
Good evening. Proceed.
Yes, I'd just like to say that this piece of equipment is a specialty piece of equipment, but it does several functions. We use this vehicle to mow the side of the road. We sweep sidewalks with it, and we clear the snow on the sidewalks in the wintertime during our snow and ice events. Right now, we have to rent the machine if we need to do the mowing and stuff like that, and some of the sidewalks. And In the wintertime, we have to subcontract that work out, which is very costly. We've been asking for this, like I said, 13 years. This is long overdue. We need to get this back into the fleet. It's a necessary piece of equipment.
Next, Precinct 2, Thomas Pinto moves to close debate. However, I don't see any other people requesting to speak. So since there are no more speakers, we're going to dispense with that motion and go right to, well, I did have one other person. I don't think she's here, Stacy Dela Cruz. Stacy, are you with us? I don't think Stacy has. She's going to be late. She hasn't joined us. So we're going to dispense now with that motion to close. We don't have anybody else. We're now going to go to the main motion on A23, which is the motion of the Advisory and Finance Committee. A yes vote is to fund the $227,895. A no vote is zero funding for A23. It's on the screen, 30 seconds. Please vote now. You're voting on A23 under Article 9. We have a total of 60 items to review under Article 9. We are at item A23 of the items in this article. And so we're going to continue, and thereafter we'll be moving on to A24. But first we're going to take a total of this vote. All of these are a majority vote, and the voting is going to end, and we're going to see the total. 64 in favor, 53 in opposition, 0 abstentions. It carries. I'm going to go to a point of order for Alan Costello, Precinct 10. Mr. Costello, on your point of order. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Yes, I was trying to get your attention prior to the vote. You know, fellow precinct member Stacy Cruz contacted you on the last 2 articles. I was wondering if there was any mechanism to put those off until such time as she joins the meeting.
You'd have to make a motion to change the order of the items. It requires a 2/3 vote. And if you wish to make that motion, I would need to know which items you wish to change the order at this time, Mr. Costello.
Mr. Moderator, if I have the opportunity, I'd like to make a motion at this time to hold over A23 and possibly A22 for reconsideration, but A23 and A22 till the end of this subsection of A articles.
Your motion is denied because you can't hold over A23 or A22 since they've been voted. If you voted on the prevailing side on either of these items, you could move to reconsider. Do you wish to reconsider? Did you vote on the prevailing side on either of these?
The first one, I don't know if we voted. I thought we skipped over it. And the second one, A23, while I was trying to get my time to speak, I did not vote.
Okay, so you did not vote on the prevailing side, so I cannot accept that. But again, if you care to make a motion to change the order as to remaining items, certainly we can take up that motion. But at this time, I'm going to move on to item A24, absent a motion to change the order. So we're going to go to A24 and Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham. Good evening. Mr. Cunningham, did you care to be heard?
No, I didn't care to be heard, Mr. Moderator, on this item. I had not aware I checked that off.
All right. So, Mr. Cunningham, on all of the items on which you in advance notified me, do you still wish to have me call you?
No, my notes said that I was next on tap for A30.
Okay, so not an A24. And going back, Mr. Costello, on A22, you're correct. We did not take A22 since no one had a question on it. And so there's no vote on that. Did you care now to debate A22?
Mr. Moderator, no, I'm not prepared to debate it, but I know my fellow precinct member was. I know she's being delayed, but I was hoping to move it to the end of this subsection. So I have that opportunity at the time.
Again, if we're going through, we're treating these as accepted unless there's debate and there's a vote and there's a question. So I'm going to continue. If your precinct member shows up, we can address at that time what her wishes might be. But at this time, I'm going to go to A25. And again, I'm going to call on Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti. Precinct 1.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My rationale for zeroing out on this portion of the article is based on funding within Burke's Law from 3 years ago that was expended on the equipment of a snow blower / loader and still has a hefty amount of funding available left on it. And that was my recommendation for why to zero it out, as there's funds available in this account that can supplement it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Wood, Assistant Director, Department of Public Works, speaking on A25. Dennis Wood.
Good evening again. I just wanted to speak on this a little bit, let people know what it is. This is a compact skid steer, a mini skid steer, if you would. You walk behind it. We can use this to get into tight spots down in like Brewster Gardens, Jenny Gristmill. We can use it for doing some sidewalk stuff. It's a piece of equipment we haven't had. Put several attachments on it. We can use it throughout the different departments. And I really urge town meeting to vote for this.
Peter Neville is in Precinct 10. Good evening, Peter Neville. Debating A25.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, town meeting members. I guess at this point I have to admit to being totally confused, and really on two levels. The first level is conceptually. I don't understand why we're voting to spend this much in free cash with COVID-19 in front of us. And for every single one of these, I agree with prior speakers who have said, can't we wait? And I guess I'd like to raise that question, can't we wait, with the Director of Finance and perhaps the Chair of the Administration and Finance Committee to speak to a rationale as to why we would, go through the exercise of nickel and diming each one of these in the light of COVID-19. That's all.
Going to first go to Kevin Canty. He is the Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty, do you care to respond to Peter Neville?
Sure, Mr. Moderator. So we did review Article 9, and we did reduce it by $589,490 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Advisory and Finance Committee has already done a review of Article 9 in addition to our original review, and reduced the items that we felt we could put off until a future town meeting to fund in relation to COVID-19. We had originally voted on Article 9 prior to the pandemic, and that subsequent amendment and reconsideration and reduction of $589,490 happened at our July 8th, 2020 meeting post the pandemic. That modification was also agreed upon, I believe, by the select board, the school committee, and by town management. And I will defer any additional comments to Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance.
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, further responding to Peter Neville. Good evening. Lynne Barrett is on our panel. We're going to go to her.
So Kevin pretty much summed it up, and we've already done a review of the capital with the select board, with the advisory and finance, and this is what's being recommended to town meeting at this time because the departments felt that these were necessary and the funding source is available and cannot be used necessarily for any operating budget item. Okay.
Thank you. Precinct 7, Nathan Siegel. We're debating item A25. Good evening, Mr. Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nate Siegel, Precinct 7. So, Ms. Barrett, I think just answered this, but just to confirm, are you satisfied with the funding source on this from a previous article that will be allowed if this is reduced?
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, responding.
No. I think what Everett has to do is he needs to identify the funding source, the article, the amount of money. He needs to make an amendment to amend the funding sources. He has done that in other articles that are going to come up a little bit later, but he has not done it in this particular case. The money that's available in an old article has to be used for that old article. If the purpose of that has been completed, that can be closed out. However, that analysis is being done through our closing process and has not been done at this point right now. So I cannot identify that funding source is available for this.
And just to clarify, a yes vote is to fund the Finance Committee recommendation, $57,787. A no would be zero funding. Any further questions, Mr. Siegel?
I think, yeah, just on these motions to reduce the funding, I think it would just be helpful to hear from Ms. Barrett, like just what she just said, is it allowable? Because to Mr. Malaguti's point, if there's funding available from previous articles, then I think we're all in favor of using it. But if it's not going to be actually allowed to be used for the intent of these new requests, then that should be something that we should be aware of when we're voting on. So I just think that clarification would be helpful.
Thank you. Precinct 5, Wrestling Brewster. Mr. Brewster, on the motion under item 825. Good evening.
Yes, thank you. Wrestling Brewster, Precinct 5. I think we need to remember free cash isn't free. And I really appreciate Everett's due diligence on Burke's Law. And I think that we need to look at this. And Everett has found money that's in Burke's Law that wasn't spent on this, that could be spent on this. And I think a lot of previous speakers have talked about, we really need to tighten our belt. And Everett's done some due diligence where he found money that we could use. And I just really appreciate Everett's due diligence. And I think that we really need to look at free cash as not free. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two motions to close debate. I'll go with the first one. Precinct 4, Charles Vautrain moves to close debate. We'll take him off the screen. We'll take Mr. O'Brien off the screen. And those are the remaining people in the queue. We're now going to vote on whether to close debate on A25 or whether to continue to debate A25. It's 2/3 vote. Whether to close debate, we're on item A25, 25 out of 60 under Article 9 in our third session. You can start voting now. You're voting whether to close debate on A25. Town meeting members are in their third session. They voted to have a fourth session tomorrow night if we do not finish the annual town meeting warrant this evening. We are continuing in Article 9. Town meeting members are throughout the town of Plymouth and elsewhere. We have officials at Town Hall. We have a few town meeting members at Plymouth North High School with in-person support. This vote ends. It is to close debate. We'll now see the vote. 84 in favor, 32 in opposition, 0 abstentions. It carries. We're not going to scroll through. We're going to go right through on this main motion on 25. Again, a yes is to fund the $57,787. A no is 0 funding. When it comes up, you're going to be voting on A25. And here we go. We're going to have the timer and vote now. You're voting on whether to approve A25 as recommended by the Advisory and Finance Committee or no to vote 0. You can also abstain. We're in item A25 under Article 9. This is the third session of Plymouth's annual town meeting. Town meeting members have been in their second hour of this evening's session, and they are voting on A25. It's a substantive motion, so we'll scroll through once we see the totals. And the totals will be coming to us. 49 say yes, 71 says no, 1 abstention. It does not carry, and therefore it will not be funded under Article 9. And we're going to scroll through the precincts, and as we do, A26, I don't have any requests. We're going to clear the screen from the last one. A27, I do not have any requests, or A28, or A29. Under A30, I have two motions to amend. I'm going to take the first one that I received, which was from Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham. Paul Cunningham moves that under item A30 of the Town Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Program, the appropriation be reduced from $28,328 to $15,000. Mr. Cunningham, on your motion to amend. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. This is anyone that's watched the two Board of Selectmen's meetings where they attempted to go through this selected ones of all these articles in two brutally painful, long 4.5-hour sessions and could agree on very little. I think they might have reduced it by 300,000. This was a fine idea of one of the select persons to buy one of these vehicles, hence the 15,000, and then buy one next year when we're a little bit better. It's kind of a practical solution. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to take a vote on the motion to amend. Again, a yes vote would be 15,000 on A30. A no vote would be 28,328. We're going to take the vote when it comes up, and here we go. We can vote now. Voting ends when we've completed 30 seconds. And in this case, we're going to be continuing to vote, and the voting will be over when we complete the 30 seconds. And after this, we continue, and you're voting on item motion 9A, item A30. And it's a motion to amend. It's Mr. Cunningham's motion. And 82 say yes, 33 say no, and an abstention 3. So it is now amended to 15,000, okay? And we did have a motion from Mr. Malaguti. We are going through the precincts right now, however, on Mr. Cunningham's motion. And Mr. Cunningham moved to have it be 15,000, which was approved. So that currently is the motion under Article A30. We now have a motion under Article A30 to amend further. In this case, Mr. Malaguti would be moving to increase from the 15,000 to 33,328. So he'd be moving to increase the motion that was amended by Mr. Cunningham. So the original amount was 43,000, and he's looking for 33,000. But we've already approved a reduction of 15,000, so he's really looking to increase back from the 15,000 up to 33,000. Mr. Malaguti, on your motion to amend.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. I'm actually withdrawing my motion as I only had this in case the other one failed.
Thank you. Then that completes item A30. And at this time, we're going to go to A31. I don't have anyone who's asked to speak. A32, Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham. Do you care to be heard on this, Mr. Cunningham? Precinct 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. Yes, this is A32, right?
That is correct.
I attended that capital request meeting, and this was bucket truck was to reach some unique extra high places. And the people were unable to answer the question of how often would you need a truck like this? That was unknown. And when questioned about if we did buy one of these unique vehicles and ask about renting it out to other towns to help pay for it, the answer was, we don't allow anyone else to drive our vehicles. So gathering up the places that you can't reach, renting is the solution, and record keeping of the number of days used will make for a good business decision in the future. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We're going to Dennis Wood. He is the Assistant Director, Department of Public Works. Mr. Wood, we're debating A32. Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to speak on this bucket truck again. we did give, that truck goes out daily. I don't have an exact days it goes out because it responds to several emergencies during storms. It could be in the middle of the night, so renting isn't an option. We've had a couple times now that the current bucket truck we have has had boom failure, and the operator has been stuck in the air, and the ground guy has had to bring him down manually from the ground. So this is a safety concern. This we really need. This vehicle responds to every emergency during the storms. Could be a hurricane, windstorm, rainstorm. No, it's got to be ready to roll, and it's got to be 100% operational. It's purely a safety issue.
Thank you. Mr. Cunningham, I understand you want to vote on this, so I don't see any other speakers. So we're going to be taking a vote on A32. A yes vote is to fund $239,397. A no vote would be 0. You'll see it's on the screen. 30 seconds. Vote now. Again, a yes vote is to fund the Advisory and Finance Committee recommendation. A no vote would be 0. Town meeting members are voting on item A32. We're approximately halfway through Article 9, and it is 7:26 in the evening. Town meeting members are continuing through this article in the annual town meeting warrant. When they complete the voting on this, we'll continue to the next item under this article. Town meeting members have completed the voting. 72 in favor, 49 in opposition, 0 abstentions. It carries. We're going on to A33 while town meeting members look to make sure their vote was correctly recorded. And we have Mr. Cunningham moves that item A33 from the fire department be reduced by $38,000 from $155,261 to $117,261. Paul Cunningham, on your motion to amend.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. We're not picking on the fire department, but my answer to people that think that we are is that when one department requests at a single town meeting funding for $35.5 million from various articles, there's going to be questions. And we did approve some $3.5 million, but we didn't get to discuss the $38,000 that was transferred from a payroll account to purchase bulletproof vests, evidently a top priority. But no fireman has ever been shot in Plymouth in 400 years, and this is not LA. Nor were we told in this meeting that when questioning various finance sources in the town, that A&F groups have $150,000 for an emergency fund, which is very reasonable. Town meeting members should know that fund was tapped for $96,361 for replacement of overhead doors for Station 2 repair project, and $39,961 for rental and setup of the temporary communication tower. So this department has spent $136,322 from this emergency fund. This request was to consider out of $155,621, which is for manual said that this outside gear should be replaced after 10 years, but it doesn't fall apart the day that the warranty ends. And thought we could replace part of it, or we could not buy 9 sets of forest fighting gear, the last major fire being in 1957, I believe. So $38,000 was just a request. Can anything be contributed to reduce the budget? Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
We're going to go to Precinct 5, Dennis Sullivan. Good evening, Mr. Sullivan, on the motion to amend.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. I was wondering if we could hear from the fire chief about the need for this item, and also if he could talk about the consequences if this motion were to not carry.
Thank you. Fire Chief Edward Bradley on the motion to amend to reduce. Good evening, Chief Bradley.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. This request is to replace structural gear that, by regulation, the National Fire Protection Agency and OSHA, which we now are under, requires that the gear be replaced after 10 years of service, regardless of what kind of shape it's in. Now, the reason for that is that there are constantly being modifications and upgrades in technology being made to the gear. Specifically, in this particular set of gear that are hitting the 10-year mark, they weren't specifically built to protect the firefighter from carcinogens that cause cancer. In the last 6 years, you've probably seen a lot of stories on TV and throughout the nation about how the firefighters are much more apt to get a number of different types of cancer because of the carcinogens they get from being in building fires and going to hazardous materials, and even in car wrecks when there's battery acid and fluids around. The gear nowadays has that built into it, so that it protects them more. And morally and ethically, we have a need to protect the firefighters. But if that's not good enough for you, then you also got to look at a recent law that was passed that automatically assumes if a firefighter gets cancer, it's an injury on duty, and you continue to pay his benefits and his paycheck for that period of time until he's well, if he gets well, and you also pay all of his medical bills. So by not funding this, there will be some sets of gear that won't get replaced, will be outside of the regulation for NFPA and OSHA, and you will put firefighters in their health and safety in jeopardy by not doing that.
Thank you. We have a motion to close debate. Precinct 11, Jeffrey DeLapp moves to close debate. We'll show the screen. Those are the people still wishing to speak on the motion to amend. We're now going to go and vote on whether to close debate. It's a procedural motion. It requires 2/3 of town meeting members. It is not debatable. We'll call it up on the screen. It's to close debate, and town meeting members now 30 seconds can vote. Please vote on whether to close debate. It requires 2/3. Town meeting members are voting on whether to end debate on Mr. Cunningham's motion to amend to reduce item A33. Again, we're approximately halfway through the Article 9 items. Town meeting members have been debating now for an hour and a half in the first part of the third session. The voting continues. We're down to a few seconds where they'll vote whether to close debate. You'll now see on the screen whether to close debate. 104 say yes, 13 no, 0 abstentions, more than 2/3. We're closed debate. We're now going to go to the main motion under A33. Now remember, it's a motion to amend, and therefore a yes vote reduces it to 117. A no vote keeps it at the recommended 155-261. Again, you're going to vote on a motion to amend. It's going to show on the screen, and then you'll have 30 seconds. There it is on the screen. We're looking, timer, vote now. Vote now on whether to amend. A yes vote is for 117-261. A no vote is 155-261. You're voting on A33. It's a motion to amend. We're in our third session. This is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. Town meeting members have been participating remotely with the Zoom webinar platform and the voting platform, and they're now voting. It's concluded. A33, 38 say yes, 80 say no, 0 abstentions. The motion does not carry, and therefore the recommendation of the Advisory and Finance Committee, 155-261. We go to A34. We're going to call on Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti, you wish to be heard on A34. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. So like the previous speaker for the last article, I am not looking at basically hurting the fire department at all. This is more of a question about looking at the funding availability. The $90,000 for the complete upgrades to the safety radio system is based on when I was looking at the Burke's Law. There's 4 articles that still have unspent funds from prior years for the public system radio upgrades. So I would like, if possible, I'd like to ask a question within this as well too for the fire chief. Is this a $90,000, if approved, looking at being used in addition to the remaining Burke's Law articles for completing this repair, or is this needed, or is the 90,000 just needed to repair and complete the restoration of it, regardless of what's still in Burke's Law?
Edward Bradley is Chief of the Plymouth Fire Department. Mr. Bradley, on item A34.
Certainly, yes, Mr. Malaguti. First of all, I am the face of this because we made a decision about 10 years ago, the police chief and I, that each department wouldn't be going after our own system. We would build one together. It would operate together out of the same sites, and therefore it would be interchangeable. So this is for police department, the fire department, and of course our EMS, and any of our partners that come in, whether it's mutual aid partners that are helping out the fire department, or any the sheriff or state police that come in to help out the police department. And yes, we were moving in one particular direction, which was called directional steering, which we have a number of sites around town because of the size of town, the 106 square miles, and the fact that we have a Pine Hills right in the center of the geographic town. It's about 300 feet high. It blocks a lot of the radio signals. So we have receiver sites throughout town. There were 6 of them altogether that make this system work good. Actually, there are 7. 2 of them were paid for by private money. The town didn't have to invest in them. We were able to get private donations, and they cost $166,000 a piece. But we originally were going towards directional, where if, as a for instance, if there was a fire truck or a police cruiser that was down in the Red Book area and they were talking back to dispatch, the closest antenna in that area would pick it up, and it would automatically vote that that was the antenna closest to that. And when the dispatcher answered, it would answer on that repeater. Motorola has looked at our total system and said that directional was not the way to go. Their engineers recommended against it. They recommended to go simulcast, which means that all of the sites receive all the time and all of the sites transmit all the time. Now, the benefit to that is, as the first one when I talked about the system where the police cruiser is down in Red Brook and it talks to the local tower down there. In North Plymouth, you wouldn't hear that. So if there were instances that were going on where the police or fire in geographic areas of the town, another area of the town, the officers or the firefighters on duty would have no idea what was going on. So the simulcast system, everybody knows what's going on all the time. So we started that way. Motorola recommended against us. And yes, this is to complete it's not complete upgrades. It is to complete the upgrade system that we have started a number of years ago. And it would be in addition to all the money that is sitting in those Burke's Law account that we were heading in one direction. And now Motorola suggests that we head in a different direction. So we'll be using all of those for like about $200,000 to get the system set up as the Motorola engineers have designed.
Mr. Malaguti, do you care to be heard?
Yes, and thank you, Chief Bradley, for explaining that. And since there was more adequate information that I got with that, I would wish to withdraw my motion on that.
Thank you. No further speakers on 834, 835. No request or 36 or 37 or 38. It brings us to A39, and we're going to begin with a motion to amend from Everett Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti moves to amend item A39 to reduce by $7,000 to $28,395. Everett Malaguti, on your motion to amend. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, Town Meeting Member, moving to amend A39. Mr. Malaguti.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, I didn't know if they muted me again, sorry. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, same as prior articles that I vetted earlier. It's just a priority of looking at some of the funding that's available in Burke's Law and trying to save some of the free cash for other things that may come before us for fall town meeting based on anything happening with COVID and property taxes.
Melissa Arrighi, Town Manager, responding. Good evening, Melissa Arrighi.
I agree that it's really important to be looking at Burke's Law. I would just caution anybody to amend this article in any way. A portion of this funding has to be used for training. About $7,000 needs to be used for training with the police officers and the new equipment that they need. So any kind of motion to reduce this in any way will really just make the purchase of it not possible.
Lynne Barrett is the Director of Finance for the responding. Lynne Barrett.
I just wanted to point out to town meeting members that since the Burke's Law report in the book was printed, that the police department has expended and encumbered the $7,000 that Everett is referring to that can be used for this project. So that is definitely off the table, cannot be used for this project, so the total amount would be necessary to be appropriated.
Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham on item A39. We have a motion to amend. Paul Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. The Plymouth Police Department is a very professionally run department and one of only a few of Massachusetts police departments that receive state certification from the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission. This acknowledgement, earned over usually 3 years, is bestowed upon after various review committees certify your record keeping, human resource activity, policy developments, training, emergency response, tactics, prisoner handling, and so forth, and demonstrates that they're using cutting edge techniques. I'm familiar with the details as a one-time representative of a division of a worldwide company looking to achieve ISO standard certification. This article does not wish to reduce any officer's firepower to do his job, but with most cruisers equipped with this firepower locked in the cruiser or in the trunk, it would be nice if their contribution to Plymouth's dire financial straits would let $35,395 let this through and be postponed to when a better financial picture is completed with the state reimbursement policies are announced. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. We're now going to vote on Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend, and it's whether or not to reduce item A39 from $35,395 to $28,395. We're now going to vote. A yes is to reduce to $28,395. A no is to keep it at $35,395. You can vote now. You're voting on the motion to amend. The motion to amend to reduce the amount. And town meeting members are now voting on item A39, motion to amend. It's whether to amend it. It is currently at $35,395. A yes vote would be to make it $28,395. A no vote to keep it at $35,395. And so town meeting members are voting on a motion to amend on item A39. 47 say yes, 71 says no, 1 abstention. It is not amended. It is currently at $35,395. And now, if there are no other speakers, we're going to vote on this main motion, if you will, on A39 after we go through and scroll through the precincts on the motion to amend. The motion to amend failed 47 to 71 to 1. We scroll through the precincts in order that town meeting members can confirm that their vote was properly recorded. Also for the public to see how your town meeting member voted or whether your town meeting member voted. Either yes, no, abstain, or a white space means they didn't vote, so they may not be here with us or they may not have voted. With precincts 10, 11, and 12, and finally 13, 14, and 15. We're now going to go to what I would call the main motion on item A39. A yes on this is going to be to fund the $35,395. A no would be 0. So we're going to call up a vote on A39. And OTI is telling us that we're going to need time. I'm also being told by the Director of Finance that when we complete the A items, she will need some time in which to tabulate the new amount under the A items. But when you see on the screen a vote for A39, it will be whether or not to approve the $35,395. Again, Mr. Cunningham has requested that we vote this separately. He would like the opportunity to vote on this as a separate item. You're now seeing this. You can vote now on A39. A yes, $35,395. A no, 0. This is on A39 under Article 9. And so, again, the voting continues. We are approximately 2/3 through on Article 9 items. And we are an hour and 3/4 into the session. We are continuing to vote, and now we've completed A39, and 80 in favor, 40 in opposition, 2 abstentions. It's a majority vote. It passes on A39. We're scrolling through the precincts as we do. A40, I have not received a request or on A41 or A42 or A43. I do have a request on A44, and the question is whether or not Stacy Dela Cruz is here with us. And if she is not, I am going to go to, she's not here, so we're going to continue and go to A45. And Everett Malaguti moves to change the funding source in Article 9A, and by reducing the free cash from $55,000 to $40,000, transferring $15,000 from Article 9A, Item 13, the April 2010 town meeting. And we're going to go to Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. Mr. Malaguti, on your motion to amend. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, again, Precinct 1. This may be a little clearer for some town meeting members from prior ones. It gives the funding sources that it's looking at. The reason that I have it this way and not in the prior ones is I had it this way before. This was one of the first motions I sent, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't in conflict with anything. So I did my other previous ones as not requiring certain funding sources because I didn't know if it was within purview of me to do it that way. So I apologize for the confusion from earlier. This is using money available from roughly 10 years ago for Burial Hill renovations. That this, since it pertains to the exact same thing, it's just shifting the money around to use for a different part of Burial Hill. Thank you.
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, responding to the motion to amend. Good evening, Lynne Barrett.
Thank you. And Everett, thank you for identifying the funding source that you wanted to use for this. However, I did reach out to our cemetery superintendent, who is fairly new in the position, and he is working on a major project, the final phase of the stone project, and that funding source is needed for that part of the project. So he needs, I would recommend not to vote this amendment to change the funding source.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend from Everett Malaguti. Everett wants to speak again. Mr. Malaguti, on your motion to amend.
Yeah, so based on Lynn's question, for the actual money needed for the headstone renovation, didn't we approve through the consent agenda earlier during the town meeting cycle a few days ago, one of these CPC articles that was for the next phase of the headstone, which also had detailed schematics and also within the planning for the funding?
Anyone care to respond as to whether consent? Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. So what the cemetery superintendent had submitted to CPC was looking at all of his previous funding sources as available, and then only asking for what was needed from CPC. So that the CPC money is in addition to the remaining money that he needs for the final phase of the project, which includes the old article money plus what CPC funded. So it's separate, but for the same project.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we take a vote on the motion to amend? So again, we're going to be calling on a motion to amend under A45, and a yes vote will be to reduce to $40,000. A no vote would be to keep Finance Committee recommendation of $55,000. When it comes up on your screen, you'll be voting on a motion to amend. 30 seconds begins now. Again, this is a motion to amend A45. A yes vote is to reduce to $40,000. A no vote is to keep at $55,000, the recommended amount. Town meeting members are in the first 2-hour part of their third session. They are 3/4 of the way through Article 9 with almost 2 hours of debate under Article 9. We will have a short recess shortly, and then we will continue until 10. We have 42 saying yes, 77 saying no, 0 abstentions. It does not carry. We'll continue on. A46, I don't have a request. I don't have a request for 47, 48, or 49. We're scrolling through the precincts on 45. But while we're doing that, we're going to continue with 50. And under item A50, Mr. Malaguti, you wish to be heard on the new well source exploration. Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. Proceed.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. I'm asking town meeting to vote the $200,000 for the new well source exploration down to 0. While we all have heard multiple times from JB about the time it takes to actually look for an area to put a well and all the time it takes to engineer a well, I believe we should be looking at the water plan that was talked about earlier in the year before COVID happened, about looking at conservation of water instead of looking for new wells as the first step to keeping water supply available to all of Plymouth. And then after conservation is done, we look for new well sources. I believe this can be delayed at least for a year until we can get some better steps on how we can proceed. Thank you.
And I was told in the last motion, Catherine Holmes voted yes on the motion to amend. We're now going to go to Dennis Wood. He is the Assistant Director, Department of Public Works, responding on A50. Dennis Wood.
Good evening again, Tommy. It's Dennis Wood. I just want to urge you to vote yes for this. We really need to find a new water source. We're primarily in the eastern pressure zone, and we need to find a good high quality water source. We just put Forges online. That's giving us 1 million gallons a day, and this will really and that's helping supplement the Bradford well. And we need to get another water supply, as in stated in the water master plan. We need to try to locate another spot for this. I urge everybody to vote.
Thank you. I'm also told Betsy Hall on A39, her yes vote did not get recorded. I would say if there's a vote and it's close and you do not get recorded, please use your V-voter function for a point of order. Otherwise, we're checking these if they're not close and getting your record. Precinct 12, Betsy, point of order, Betsy Hall. Betsy Hall, point of order. Good evening.
Steve, I pressed the point of order button several times and I was not, no one noticed that I pressed the button a while back. So I did press it a couple of times.
Thank you. For some reason, it didn't record, but I appreciate that explanation. Precinct 8, Donald Williams on the motion on A50. Good evening, Mr. Williams.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Don Williams, Precinct 8. I think that regardless of whether we do conservation work or not, and that's still up in the air with Plymouth, there's been no commitment to do that. What we need to do is avoid looking for wells at the last possible year of or last possible 2 or 3 years of a water long-range plan. The water is going to be easier to find now. It's going to be cheaper. There's going to be fewer people around complaining about it and worrying about their own wells and their ponds losing level. So I think that this is the time to all get together and look for the water together rather than having it rushed on us at the very end. So I would urge that we vote for this. We're always going to need more water, whether we can serve or not. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Further discussion, I'm not seeing anyone on A50, so we're going to vote on A50. A yes is for the 200,000, a no is for 0 on item A50 under Article 9. Voting now. You got 30 seconds in which to vote. A yes is for the recommended 200,000, a no is for 0. We're on Article 9, item A50, and town meeting members are voting, and we'll continue on the items under Article A on the annual town meeting warrant. Town meeting is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18, and town meeting members are continuing with the warrant under Article 9, and the voting has been completed. We're now going to look for the results. 98 say yes, 20 say no, 1 abstention. It carries on A50. No requests for A51, 52, 53, and now we're going to A54 as we scroll through the precincts on 50. And on A54, I'm going to call on Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. It's Water Smart Software, 65,000. Mr. Malaguti.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. As I received more information on this, I'm actually withdrawing this motion.
Thank you. A55, no request. A56, Everett Malaguti, replace 2002 excavator for transfer station, $222,640. Mr. Malaguti.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My motion to amend this article using various Burke's Law articles from multiple municipal accounts that have been in the hands of the town for multiple years to fund a portion of this. It is not taking away money for this project and this piece of equipment. It is just moving money around. I don't know if some of it was previously used before I created this motion, but that was my determination on this motion, to use funds that are already in existence before using retained earnings for this, to save money for the transfer station users in case some money is needed for other dynamics in the recycling market.
Thank you. And town meeting members can see the motion to amend the funding source from Everett Malaguti, and we're going to go to Chad Hunter. He is the harbor master. Good evening, Chad Hunter, on this motion to amend.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Speaking on B2.
No, we're not. I'm sorry, we're not on B2. We're on A56. We'll come back to you if you want to speak on B2. We're on Article 9, A56. Any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call for a vote on A56, the motion to amend. And if you approve it, you're changing the funding sources on item 56 by reducing solid waste retained earnings, appropriation, and who wants to speak? And before we take a vote, I'm going to call on Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance. We're going to hold off on voting. Lynne Barrett, good evening.
Hi, so Everett succeeded on this one. The 2 available funding sources that he is identifying are available, and I would recommend that you approve this motion to amend.
Thank you. No further discussion. I'll now take a vote on whether to move to amend the funding sources proposed by Everett Malaguti. A yes is to change, and we're going to call this up on the screen, and we're voting now. We're voting now on item A56 to change the funding sources on the total amount. Town meeting members have time in which to vote, and they are voting. We're going to be taking a recess shortly. It'll be a short recess, and when we come back, while we're gathering back, there's some special observance for today, being a very special day, and we'll be talking more about that as we return back from the break. And the voting has ended on this, and we're going to look now to see 110 say yes, 8 say no, 0 abstentions. It carries. And the last A item to come before us, Everett Malaguti moves on to change the funding source on item A57. Mr. Malaguti. Precinct 1.
Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My rationale for changing the funding source as reducing the retained earnings portion of this is because the free cash that is being used and the actual amount that this machine is going to be used for the solid waste division for the composting is minuscule compared with what it's actually going to be done with the machinery. The machinery is being used for other ABC material, which is asphalt, brick, concrete, that is not part of the solid waste program, but it's from other DPW projects and for other aspects within the DPW department itself, not just the solid waste division. And I believe that it should be apportioned based upon how much it will be used per each department. And since it won't be used not even half the amount by the solid waste department, that is why I reduced it to a quarter of the funding from solid waste retained earnings and 3/4 from free cash based on the amount of usage this machine will take.
Thank you. Dennis Wood is the Assistant Director, Department of Public Works. Mr. Wood, do you care to be heard on Everett Malaguti's motion to amend?
Yes, good evening. I would like to just request that we vote for this positively, the town meeting members. It's not going to be used for recycled asphalt and gravel. It's going to be used for compost, loam, and sand. We cannot run cement and recycled asphalt through that, but it will be used daily for sand, composting, and loam.
Mr. Wood, just to clarify, are you encouraging town meeting members to vote no on the motion to amend or to vote yes?
No, don't amend.
No on the amendment. Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Malaguti, and then we're going to have to go to the break. Mr. Malaguti, you care to be heard further?
Yes, I care to be heard further based upon what Mr. Wood said is complete opposite to what was given to the selectmen through the town manager and the DPW director during the early spring, late winter timeframe when these articles were being vetted. And it was being told that it would not be just used for loam and sand and compost. It would be used for other materials as well, since it has the trommel and cage to separate out thicker and thinner materials, and that it will not be used entirely for the solid waste division.
Further discussion? Precinct 4, Virginia Davis, and then if we have more people, I'm going to, oh, her name has left. Okay. Precinct 4, Virginia Davis. Good evening. You need to unmute.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Could we just have Lynne Barrett again, just clarify this? I'm a little confused.
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, could you respond to Virginia Davis's request for you to comment on this motion to amend?
I think the motion to amend is not to reduce the project. It's just to amend the funding sources. Whatever it is saying is instead of a 50-50 allocation between the general fund and the solid waste enterprise division, he feels as if it's a 75-25% allocation. Now, in preparing this project in review with the department, with the solid waste department, the DPW director and the assistant DPW director, we felt very comfortable with the allocation of the 50-50, and that's what we are recommending. So we would recommend against voting for
Thank
the
you.
amendment.
And I have a
Thank
motion
you.
to close debate. I have no other people asking to speak, so I'm not going to take that motion to close debate. We're going to go right to the motion to amend. So we're going to be voting on A57, motion to amend, and you'll see it's Mr. Malaguti's motion. A yes vote will change the funding sources. A no vote will keep the Finance Committee recommendation. You have 30 seconds in which to vote. Town meeting members can now vote. Start voting now. And this will be the last vote before we take a break. We're going to take a 5-minute break, except that I'll probably come back early to do a special observance for today, being the 100th year, the centennial, when not only town meeting member women and men can vote, but we can all vote, men and women in this country, as a result of the centennial. We'll be talking more about that in a few minutes, but right now we're completing the vote on A57. The vote is 37 say yes, 82 say no, 2 abstentions. The motion does not carry. The Director of Finance will be giving us updated numbers when we return from the break. You're going to take a break now. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in a few minutes. It is 8:04 p.m. Good evening. Brief recess. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all back from our evening recess. It is 8:08 p.m. and we're resuming. Suffragists began their organized fight for women's equality in 1848 when they demanded the right to vote during the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York. For the next 72 years, women leaders lobbied, marched, picketed, and protested for the right to the ballot. The U.S. House of Representatives finally approved the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which guaranteed women the right to vote on May 21, 1919. The U.S. Senate followed 2 weeks later, and the 19th Amendment went to the states, where it had to be ratified by 3/4 of the then 48 states to be added to the Constitution. By a vote of 54 to 47, Tennessee became the last state needed to ratify the 19th Amendment on August 18, 1920. Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby issued a proclamation declaring the 19th Amendment ratified and part of the U.S. Constitution on August 26, 1920, forever protecting American women's right to vote. And today, more than 68 million women vote in elections because of the courageous suffragists who never gave up the fight for equality. Tonight I'm wearing a pin that has been presented by the Pilgrim Hall Museum. 100 years ago today, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution guaranteed American women's right to vote because it was ratified as Tennessee became the 36th state to approve it. And there you see the button. And we're now going to go to Virginia Davis, Precinct 4 Town Meeting member, and she is going to be modeling what the woman wore at that time. This is designed by Alice Paul in 1913. The women wore sashes of purple, white, and gold. Purple was the color of loyalty. White, the emblem of purity or quality of purpose. Gold, the color of light and life, the torch of purpose. And the flag, also designed by Alice Paul, and we'll show the flag, in 1920, has the three colors and the 36 states representing the ratified states. And so we'd like to thank Precinct 4 Virginia Davis for modeling this, and also for Precinct 3 Donna Curtin, involved in this observance of the 100-year centennial of the change to our Constitution, giving women the right to vote. And that is 100 years ago today. And we have women in the town of Plymouth continuing to vote not only in the elections, but throughout our Plymouth Town Meeting. This evening, we wish to recognize PAC TV, which is cablecasting this town meeting live on Comcast 15 and Verizon 47 on PAC TV's streaming channel, pactv.org/live. We'd like to thank Julie Thompson, Mark McKinley, Brooke Hoffman, the entire PAC TV team. Of course, great thanks to Assistant Moderator Nicole Manfredi, her team of professionals, for their ongoing organization of this virtual town meeting. I'm being told quite a bit of responding in the chat room instead of the help desk. Town meeting members becoming more sophisticated with remote participation in our virtual town meeting, which this evening, Plymouth North High School has also been provided once again by the Plymouth School District for our use as a remote location for town meeting in-person technical support. We want to thank Dr. Gary Maestas, the Plymouth School Committee, for their generous contribution to this virtual town meeting. And at this time, we're going to be continuing with the Article 9 final vote. We're going to go to Director of Finance Lynne Barrett, and she's going to give us the final numbers as amended on Article 9. Welcome again, Lynne Barrett. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and town meeting members. So the votes that you took tonight, you took votes on separate articles. Those were A5, A6, A14, A15, A23, A25, A32, and A39, for a total of $1,369,515, all being funded from free cash. So those votes have already happened. The remaining vote that needs to take place is all the other items that there were no questions or items that either amendments failed or amendments passed. I have adjusted those numbers. So that's a total appropriation of $7,574,928. And the funding sources for those are $4,138,838 from free cash, $39,600 from cemetery perpetual care, $81,000 from sale of lots, $119,000 from the fire safety revolving account, $649,600 from sewer retained earnings, $1,573,400 from water retained earnings, $378,490 from solid waste retained earnings, $340,000 from Article 4A1 of the 2019 special town meeting, $209,000 from Article 4A from the 2018 fall annual town meeting, $18,000 from Article 9A15 of the April 2010 town meeting, and $28,000 from Article 9A24 of the April 2011 town meeting.
Lynne Barrett, if you could just again confirm that number. I have $7,574,000 and
928. 7,574,928.
And there's your number, town meeting. We're now going to take a final vote on this main motion as amended, and it's debatable. David Peck, Precinct 4, on the final motion on the A items under Article 9. David Peck, good evening.
From my notes, we only reduced A2, A25, and A30, and the amounts we reduced were far less than to get us from 9 million to 7.5 million. So I don't quite understand the arithmetic.
Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, could you respond to David Peck as to how you've arrived at that? I believe it has to do with all of the other items on which we voted, regardless of whether there was a reduction. Is that correct?
That's correct. You took separate and unique votes on for 8 articles. So the ones that are remaining to be voted on add up to the $7 million figure.
Yeah. So you're voting on the remaining ones that we passed over.
Okay, so that is the everything except the ones we voted on.
Yes,
because
we went through.
Because also when you did the list, I don't remember hearing you talk about A2 in terms of the adjustment made there.
A2 was reduced to 352,000.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion. Precinct, Mr. Peck, any further comments?
No, I'm all set.
Thank you. Precinct 10, Alan Costello. Good evening, Mr. Costello.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. This goes back to my question earlier when we started the A9A. A3 and A12 have a 0 request, but they included in this article, if voted, if there are other funding sources that come up at a later time, will they be able to be, those projects able to be completed? Or are those nixed out of 9A?
Currently, there was no motion. We didn't vote a motion for those, and unless you have a motion to amend to present those with a request, they are coming in at 0.
Can I make a motion to delete those two, A3 and A12 in their entirety from our vote?
There's no need to do that. We're voting 0. They're not. They're not being. We're not asking for funding, so no, it's not necessary.
Hey, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote then on the remaining items under 9A? Again, the amount $7,575,928. We're going to call that up on the screen for the voting. Town meeting members, you'll have 30 seconds to vote. Please vote now. You're voting on the main motion on 9A as amended, $7,574,928. in addition to those items we already voted with amounts. Town meeting, after we complete Article 9, we will go and proceed with the B section of the items under Article 9. The voting is concluding under the A items. We're going to see what the total is for town meeting members. 106 in favor, 14 no, 0 abstentions. It carries. We're going through the precincts to see how they voted, and while we do that, we're going to begin with Mr. Canty's main motion. And under 9B, he votes that moves that the town appropriate the sum of $9,100,000 to pay the costs of capital projects listed as B1 through B3. These are a 2/3 vote. They involve borrowing. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Good evening once again, Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee's reconsideration of Article 9 at our July 8th, 2020 meeting also impacted this portion of Article 9. In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this portion of Article 9. The amended spreadsheet for this portion of Article 9 can also be found in the Supplement 1 document that has been provided to all town meeting members.
I did have some motions by an article by a town meeting member in Precinct 10. She is not with us, so we're going to be taking up all three under 9B. Any further discussion? If not, we're going to be moving to the vote. We're going to call the vote up on the screen for 9B. This is going to require a 2/3 vote from town meeting. And when you see it on the screen, along with a timer of 30 seconds, we're going to hold off before we vote. We've got a couple of points of order. First, Brendan Brady has a point of order, Precinct 10. Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can I actually move on behalf of Stacy De La Cruz to divide Article 9B?
No, you wouldn't be moving on her behalf. This will be your motion. Do you care to move?
Okay, so then yes, I will actually move to divide Article 9B.
All right, take up a separate motions. B want to be taken up separate. All right, so that's a motion to divide. We're going to debate that before we move forward with it. Mr. Brady, I've accepted that. Before I'm going to hear your argument in favor of that, I'm going to go to another point of order on Gerald Sirico. Point of order, Precinct 3, Gerald Sirico. I'm told now that you're not showing in the Zoom webinar, so if you reappear, we'll come back. Mr. Brady, do you care to be heard on your motion to divide?
Yes, I would actually, because Stacy just reached out to me. She's still at work, and she was very involved in the capital allocation projects for all of these, and had questions, serious questions raised on the new sidewalks in West Elementary. And I kind of agree with her opinion, and we are in a need-want kind of economy right now, and we should be looking critically at a new sidewalk.
Thank you. We're deciding whether to move to divide the B motions and to separate B1. Next, Precinct 11, Ronald Riley. Speaking on the motion, Mr. Riley, on whether to divide. Precinct 11, Ronald Riley, good evening. Ronald Riley, Precinct 11.
How's that?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ron Riley, Precinct 11. I just want to speak towards the sidewalks. This is something that I have been advocating on for many, many years now, probably as much as 15. We're on Route 80, and my kids have
so, Mr. Riley, we're first voting on whether or not to divide and hear it separately. Would you like to hear it separately, Mr. Riley?
I would not want them on the road. I would let them cut across the street through
Mr.
yards
Riley?
to get over to Colony Place.
Mr. Riley, would you like to argue?
Traffic. This is a 50-mile-an-hour road. Speed limit's 45, but they drive 50. It's a very narrow road. The guardrails push you onto the road. Sidewalks are drastically needed. But I'm not in favor of this. Reason being is there is state money, I believe, that is out there available. Quick history, 2010, there were 6 programs available for money for municipalities: Public Works Economic Development, Community Development Action Grant, Growth Districts Initiative, Small Town Rural Assistance Program, Massachusetts Opportunity Relocation and Expansion Program, Transit-Oriented Development. All these ended in 2010 to join into the one Mass Works program. The Plymouth Town Wharf was a recipient for $2 million for the public wharf reconstruction. The Mass Works infrastructure program, as JB has pointed out to me, is geared towards multifamily, but it is a multifaceted program. As I just explained, there were 6 programs that went into it. So under the state Mass, this is available online, but Mass Works grant,
Mr. Riley,
Section
we're
B
debating whether
per
to divide
MGL
this.
Chapter 23A, primary purpose of the Mass Works program
Mr. Riley, these
issue grants to
arguments
municipalities
would be for your argument on B1. Right now, we're deciding whether to divide. Do you have any more arguments on whether to divide the procedural motion?
Okay, no, that's it could be divided. I'm fine that I'm
Thank you.
done.
All
I'll
right, we're
speak in
going to
a few
move
minutes.
to, we have a motion to close debate from Peter Neville. This is on whether or not to divide the B motions. So we're going to first look at the list. I don't think we have anybody else who wants to be heard. Mr. Neville was to close. Mr. Brendan Brady, we already heard his point of order. So we don't need to vote on whether to close debate because we have no one else who asked to speak. So we're going to go right to the motion to divide. So Brendan Brady, Precinct 10, moves to divide from Article 9B, the item B1 to take up separately. We're now going to do the motion to divide. It is a procedural motion, and town meeting members will have 30 seconds on whether to divide the B items. It is not to close debate. We're going to change the heading on this. We're not voting to close debate. There was nobody else who wanted to speak, so we're not voting. Here we go. 9B, we're not voting on, we are voting on whether to divide B1 out. We'll take it that way. You can begin voting now. You're voting on whether to divide B1 separate from B2 and B3. It is a motion to divide, to take that separately. A town meeting member is voting. It is a majority vote. We will then be continuing the debate based on the vote of town meeting on the motion to divide. It is a majority vote. Town meeting members have the opportunity to vote on a procedural motion. We will not be scrolling through the precincts, but we'll take the total of the vote on whether to divide. And the results are 76 say yes, 39 say no, 1 abstention. So now we're going to go and we're going to debate B1 only. And we have now to treat separately B1 and the recommendation that you have on B1. And it is been originally moved by the Advisory and Finance, and it is for $1,500,000 borrowing. Any further discussion? Looks like Ronald Riley wishes to speak on the motion, but we have other people who have not yet spoken. So we're going to go to Precinct 13, Anita Hadley. Anita Hadley on B1. Good evening, Ms. Hadley. Anita Hadley is Precinct 13. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow town meeting members. Anita Hadley, Precinct 13. I'm also a member of the West Plymouth Steering Committee, and we have worked very hard on this proposal. We have met with town officials. We are in favor of this. There's for public safety, for the children's safety. As Ron mentioned, the speed that cars go through there. So I am respectfully asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to continue. Mr. Neville, Precinct 10, I think your motion to close debate was earlier on the motion to divide. Is that correct? Precinct 10, Peter Neville.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. We'll remove him. We're going to go to Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti, on the motion under B1. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. Good evening, Mr. Malaguti.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. I am in support of having sidewalks in this area for the reasons that Ms. Hadley and Mr. Riley stated about the safety of children as well as the better access and movability of pedestrians. But I concur with Mr. Riley that I believe that I am in opposition to this only because I believe that we need to look, as Mr. Riley stated, at the Mass Works and other sources of funding, hopefully getting a grant to it. And if not, we could come back to fall and do a smaller ask of an article to do some portion of this while we await a possible grant. So I'm totally in favor of having sidewalks in this area as I work in this area and drive through it all the time and I see the hazards, but I can't support the funding for this at this time.
Thank you. And I believe Precinct 13, Anita Hadley, do you care to be heard again? Your name is on the screen, or are you all set? Precinct 13, Anita Hadley.
I just want to just reiterate that, you know, for public safety and children's safety, I request that the town meeting members vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Yes, and we're going to go to Dennis Wood, Assistant Director, Department of Public Works, asking to respond. Dennis Wood, good evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to respond again to let everybody know that we have done our due diligence to try to get funding for these sidewalks. It doesn't apply for Mass Works. It's not a doesn't qualify. And we also did apply for a Safe Routes to School, and we didn't get it. And we looked for other sources of funding, and we haven't. That's why we're coming to you tonight, trying to get the money.
Thank you. Precinct 4, Charles Vautrain moves to close debate. We're going to show the queue. We'll remove Mr. Vautrain to show who still wishes to speak on item B1 under Article 9. Let's show the queue. There we go. We're now going to take a vote on whether to close debate. It's a procedural motion, requires a 2/3 vote. Town meeting members can vote on whether to close debate on B1, and they have not yet voted. We are going to clear the screen and start a new motion to close debate. It is not debatable. It is a 2/3 vote, and it is a procedural motion. Town meeting members have been voting throughout the evening on both procedural and substantive motions. You'll see it's now on the screen. You can vote now. You have 30 seconds in which to vote. Town meeting members are voting on whether to close debate, and depending on the vote of town meeting, they are considering whether to close debate on Article 9, Item B1, DPW Engineering for West Plymouth, Plimpton Road, and West Elementary School sidewalks. $1,500,000. Borrowing requires a 2/3 vote. Town meeting members are voting on whether to close debate. And we will look at the vote of town meeting members, the results. 94 say yes, 26 no, 0 abstentions. It carries, it's procedural. We will now go directly to the substantive vote. So town meeting members are now going to vote on Article 9, Item B1. It is a 2/3 vote. It is a request for and a recommendation for $1.5 million to borrow for these sidewalks. We're going to call up the vote on the screen for Item B1 under Article 9, and it is a 2/3 vote. And you'll have 30 seconds in which to vote. Town meeting members are continuing in the annual town meeting warrant, and this is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. We're clearing the screen in order to be able to vote on the substantive motion recommended by the Advisory and Finance Committee on Article 9, Item B1. And this particular vote requires a 2/3 vote, as do all of the items. We're going to now be voting. 30 seconds, vote now. You're voting on 9B, B1 amended. and town meeting members are voting. And after we vote, we're going to go back to the A items for a slight change in the math. And we'll be going to the Director of Finance, Lynne Barrett, but we'll only do that after we get the votes on this, as well as scroll through the precincts so we can see how town meeting members vote. It requires a 2/3 vote. We're going to go back, not to Lynne Barrett yet. We're going to go back to OTI because we have to scroll through the precincts. 64 say yes, 54 say no, 2 abstentions. It does not carry by 2/3. It does fail. We're going through the precincts. We're going to go through all 15 precincts. The town meeting members can see how your vote was recorded. In addition, the public can see how the town meeting members voted on this particular item. And after we continue through the precincts, precincts 13, 14, and 15, although over a majority did favor this, it required a 2/3 vote. We do not have the 2/3. The motion fails since we don't have 2/3. Now we're going to go to Lynne Barrett. She's the Director of Finance. She's going to make comments on 9A. Lynne Barrett. Good evening.
Thanks, moderator. So I hate working on the fly like that, and so I've taken the time to reconcile the numbers on 9A, especially since David Peck brought to my attention items. So I just want to make it clear that I did miss on the amendment for A30. So I'm going to give you corrected numbers for all of the items on 9A that are voting as a lump sum. And that amount is $7,546,600. And the funding sources are $4,110,510 from free cash, and all the other ones have not changed. So that plus the items that you voted separately total up to $8,916,115. And to get back to the original motion that Advisory and Finance had, this number does reconcile back to that number because you reduced A2 by 50,000, you reduced A30 by 28,328, and then you voted down Article A25 for 57,787.
Thank you. Unless we have an objection from a town meeting member, we're going to revise the amount due to the clerical change. And the new amount, $7,546,600. If there's no objection, that will be the number recorded by the town clerk as the official vote of town meeting. I'm going to go to Precinct 13, Anita Hadley, point of order, followed by Precinct 4, Virginia Davis, point of order. Anita Hadley, your point of order. Good evening. Anita Hadley, do you have a point of order? Unmute yourself. Speaking privileges, Precinct 13. Anita Hadley. Anita Hadley?
Yes, my vote should have been yes, not no.
It was a yes, thank you. And that was on the B1. Precinct 4,
Yes.
Virginia Davis, your point of order. Virginia Davis?
Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. This is sort of a request. If we could get an email tomorrow that would have all these figures broken down from Lynne. It's really hard to write them down as she's going over them. It's just really a clarification. It's not really to change any vote.
Thank you, Virginia Davis. And by the way, for those of you who are watching, that's the voice of the town meeting member who modeled the dress that was worn by the suffragists over 100 years ago. So again, thank you, Precinct 4, Virginia Davis. We're going to Precinct 2, Richard Cirque for a point of order. Good evening, Mr. Cirque. Richard Cirque, Precinct 2.
I just want to ask essentially the same question that David Peck asked of Ms. Barrett, because I didn't understand the response. As my notes indicate, as I think Mr. Peck's does, that the only changes we made in Article 9A were to A2 and to A25 and to A30. And maybe I'm missing something, but I don't understand how the 9,052,230 comes down to 7,546,660.
Mr. Cirque, I believe that in addition to those that were changed, there were some that were not changed but were voted. So we actually went through the A group, and some of them we voted individually, and then we voted in addition all those other items that were not previously voted. I'll go to Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance, to see if her calculations are consistent with that. Lynne Barrett.
That's correct, Mr. Moderator. So we took individual votes for Article A5, Article A6, A14, A15, A23, A25, A32, and A39. And all of those votes totaled 1,369,515. And when you add that to the 7,546,600, you come up with a total appropriation for Article 9A of 8,916,115. And then those three items that you just referred to that we amended or voted down, those items would bring you back up to that 9,052,230.
Thank you. Mr. Cirque, does that answer your question?
I guess so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue. Article 9, B2 and B3. We have requests first under B2. Going to call on Chad Hunter, the Harbor Master. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chad Hunter, the Harbor Master. We just, David and I wanted to pull this article. This article was dependent on grant funding, which was going to cover 50% of the dredging. The project is still much needed. And we also had a really great contractor that worked in and around the T-Wharf area last year that was going to come back. But due to us not being awarded the grant funding, we obviously it wasn't pulled, but we're not requesting this be approved.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty, are you withdrawing your request at this time based on Chad Hunter's representation?
Well, the Advisory and Finance Committee's vote happened prior to that information being known. So I imagine we would have voted not to approve it had we known that, but I can't speak for the entire committee on the fly without us having had a meeting. But I would report that we probably would not have voted to fund a project that the town was not requesting given the circumstances.
Okay, in that case, we're going to continue to debate B2. I'm going to take them separately, absent a motion to divide. And I have a request from Donald Williams, Precinct 8. We're going to be debating B2 first. Donald Williams, good evening.
Good evening again. I was just going to ask that we divide them out. I thought that would be the best way to do it.
Yes, I did it. Sua sponte. Thank you.
Sorry.
Anyone
Sorry.
else care to be heard? Christopher Hull, Precinct 14. Precinct 14, Christopher Hull, speaking privileges.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Christopher Hull, Precinct 14. A question for the Harbor Master. You're recommending that this article is still a priority for the town. Could you describe, would you like to see this article approved by the town? Do you expect to see that costs will continue to go up and that your permits might expire? Is this a timely matter to take care of this issue?
Chad Hunter is Harbor Master responding to Christopher Hull. Mr. Hunter.
So clearly this is a much needed project, but this project isn't going to move forward without the 50% grant funding that we were looking to secure. We did have the contractor that we extended the contract, so hopefully he would have been coming back this fall to complete the project, but unfortunately that's not going to happen without the grant match that we were looking to get from the state.
Thank you, Chad Hunter, Harbor Master. Precinct 10, Peter Neville, good evening. We're debating Article 9B2. Mr. Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Neville, Precinct 10. Just want to make sure my understanding is that the author of this motion has recommended that it be removed, that there be, if there's a vote, it's a vote for no funding for this article. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. The Advisory and Finance Committee made this motion. I asked Mr. Canty if he was withdrawing it. He said no. So we are still considering the Finance Committee recommendation of $2,500,000. We'll be voting it separately. Mr. Neville?
I would move that this article have zero funding in it.
You don't move that. It's not an appropriate motion. You can argue against the motion, and you can argue that you'll vote in opposition.
Well, I'm going to argue in favor of the Harbor Master feeling and suggestion that this is not the time. So I'm in support of him and voting no on this motion. How's that?
Yeah, it's very good. I have two motions to close debate. I'm going to take the first one. Michael, I have three motions to close debate. I'll take the first one from Michael Landers. We'll remove all of those moving to close debate so we can show who still wants to speak. And we're now going to vote on whether to close debate on 9B2. It is a procedural motion, requires a 2/3 vote, and town meeting members will be voting. It's a 2/3 vote. You'll see it on the screen. 30 seconds, vote now. You're voting on whether to close debate on Article 9B2. Town meeting members can decide to limit the length of debate. As moderator, I determine the scope of the debate. This is a procedural motion. Town meeting members often use it in order to determine whether to continue debate on a particular issue or whether to conclude it and go to voting. Town meeting has been in 3 sessions. We're in the second half of our 3rd session. The voting has now ended on this procedural motion. You'll see how they vote. They're going to vote. 110 say yes, 7 say no, 0 abstentions. They want to end debate. They want to vote on Article 9B2. We're going to call that up on the screen, and when it comes up, they'll have 30 seconds in which to vote on Article B2. A yes will be for $2,500,000. A no will be 0. We're looking for Article 9B2. It is a substantive motion. It is there. 30 seconds. You can vote now. Town meeting members are voting. We're going to continue. Next, go to item B3. We're going to treat that separately. And then that would complete the items under Article 9. But currently, we're doing 9B2. And we're on Article 9B2. And on Article 9B2, the voting is going to be ending in 5 seconds. Town meeting members are voting now whether to approve this. It requires a 2/3 vote. You'll see on the screen 6 say yes, 112 say no, 1 abstentions. It does not carry. And we're going to continue to scroll through the precincts. We're going to scroll through all 15 to make sure that town meeting members have voted in the way in which they intended. While we do that, we're going to be looking at item B3. It is the DPW Water Department. It has to do with Manomet zone pipe upgrades. It is for $5,100,000. It is borrowing. It's a 2/3 quantum of vote. You previously heard from Kevin Canty, and now we're going to go to Precinct 5, Michael Withington. Mr. Withington, do you care to be heard on item B3? No, he's withdrawn his name. We're going to go to Brigitta Keene, Precinct 15. Brigitta, do you care to be heard?
Yes, Brigitta Keene, Precinct 15. I have a question for the appropriate director. Is this $500,000 purely for water piping? And if so, why or can it be funded over a period of time from the Water Enterprise Fund?
Thank you.
Thank
It is
you.
for $5,100,000 will go to Assistant Director, Department of Public Works, Dennis Wood, who is here this evening to respond to questions of the Department of Public Works. Dennis Wood, do you care to respond? To Brigitte Keene.
Yes, this money would be put towards to upgrade the existing system to get the pipe sized properly so we can move the water from east to west without restrictions.
Thank you. We're going to Precinct 8, Donald Williams. Mr. Williams, we're debating Article 9, Item B3. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question is to Mr. Wood again, and I would ask him whether this isn't something that we can put off. It's a lot of money. It's borrowed money. And I would feel more comfortable fiscally to have this put off.
Thank you. Dennis Wood, Assistant Director, Department of Public Works, responding to a question from Donald Williams.
These upgrades are needed from our master plan. We need this to be able to move the water because during the summer times and the demand, we're not being able to meet up with them right now the way it is. With these upgrades, we'll be able to reach those demands.
Thank you. Precinct 15, Brigitte Keene. Brigitte, good evening once again on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brigitte Keene, Precinct 15. Mr. Wood, I had asked a question about whether or not funding could come from an enterprise fund because it's water, but I didn't hear an answer to that. And then additionally, I'll add one other question. Didn't the Manomet Zone water pipes just recently get replaced all along Taylor Avenue? And is this for a different part of the Manomet Zone pipe upgrade? So there's two parts to my question. Thank you.
Dennis Wood may be responding to the second part. I may need Lynne Barrett on the first part. Dennis Wood on the second question.
Lynne could probably answer the first part.
She will,
the second
yes.
part is, yes, we did do upgrades down Taylor Ave, but this is mainly the other parts of Manomet, particularly would be Beaver Dam Road, that area there to move it, like I said, from east to west and other areas throughout the parts of Manomet.
Thank you. Lynne Barrett, Director of Finance on the Enterprise Fund question. Good evening once again.
This project is a water enterprise project, so it would be funded through borrowing through the Water Enterprise Fund, and we would only borrow the amount necessary to complete the project, and it would be paid off over like between a 20 and 30-year period.
Thank you. Precinct 8, Catherine Holmes on item B3, Article 9. Catherine Holmes, good evening.
A quick question for Mr. Wood. Did you say that that you couldn't move the water in the summertime, or is it all the time?
Dennis Wood, Assistant Director, Department of Public Works. Mr. Wood.
It's all the time. The pipe sizing varies, so there's restrictions going through the system. But in the summertime, there's more of a need, and this would help us be able to move the water easily to meet that need.
Okay, I have a second follow-up to that.
Go ahead.
So if we are to postpone this 8 months until the spring budget, what is the impact to that?
It's just we're not meeting the needs for the system. I mean, if something was ever to happen to one of the other pumps or wells to go down, we would have that issue, not be able to get that water there.
Catherine Holmes, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have two motions to close debate. I'm going to go with the first one. Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy moves to close debate. It's not debatable. We'll remove Mr. O'Brien. We have one person who still wishes to be heard. We're now going to vote procedural motion on whether to close debate. It is a 2/3 vote from town meeting members. And at this time, when we see it on the screen, we'll be voting on whether to close debate on Article 9, Item B3. Vote now. You have 30 seconds in which to vote. And town meeting members are voting on a procedural motion. It is whether to close debate on Article 9, Item B3. And they are now voting. We'll find out whether they want to continue to debate this or whether they want to go right to the substantive vote on the motion before them for $5,100,000. Town meeting members are in their third session. They've completed the voting on whether to close debate. We'll see what the results are. 104 say yes, 14 say no, 0 abstentions. we are now done debating. We're going to go to the main motion, Article 9, item B3, $5,100,000. It is borrowing. It'll be a 2/3 vote as to whether to approve this. We're going to call it up on the screen. And before we do that, I've got a point of order from Precinct 3, Richard Barbieri. Mr. Barbieri, your point of order on the matter before us. Richard Barbieri.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to say the screen didn't come up to vote, and I was going to vote yes.
Thank you. We did not show that because it was procedural, but OTI heard your vote, and they can take it if it didn't, for some reason, register. Thank you. So we're now going to vote on Article 9, item B3. And it is a 2/3 vote. When it comes up on your screen, we're going to look for the timer. You'll have 30 seconds. Vote now. You're voting on Article 9, B3. It's a 2/3 vote. DPW water management zone pipe upgrades, $5,100,000. It is borrowing. Town meeting is in its third session, coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. We are here live at PAC TV Studios. I'm joined by the assistant moderator, also by town council members from OTI Technologies, and of course, PAC TV supporting us throughout town meeting. We've completed the voting. 56 say yes, 63 say no, 0 abstentions. It does not carry. We're going to go and scroll through the precincts. And as we do, you'll see all 15 precincts. Article number 12 was voted in the consent agenda. Article 13 was voted in the consent agenda. Article 14 voted in the consent agenda. Article 15 has been withdrawn. 16A in the consent agenda, 16B, consent agenda 16C, consent agenda 16D, withdrawn. 16E, consent agenda 16F, consent agenda 16G, consent agenda 17 is in the consent agenda, 18, 16H in the consent agenda, 16H is to be debated. Let me just check on that for a moment. And while I do that, 17C is the consent agenda, 18 is withdrawn, 19 no motion, no action, and we will go to double check on 16H. What? And it's not in the consent agenda. So we're going to go to 16H in the annual town meeting warrant. And you'll see here, Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate the sum of $1,260,706 from the fiscal year 2021 estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund for the fiscal year 2021 Community Preservation budget, and to set aside sums for future appropriation as follows. You have the recommendation text in front of you. We're now going to go to Kevin Canty. But before we do that, we have a point of order from Precinct 5, Belinda Brewster. Belinda Brewster, good evening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had voted no on the B3 vote, and my vote was not recorded.
Thank you. And OTI has that. Is that right? And in addition, I'm also told that Colleen Coughlin voted yes on the last vote, and it did not record. So we'll take those. We're now going to go to Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, on annual meeting Article 16H. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 10-0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 16H. Town meeting approval of this article will allow the Community Preservation Committee to allocate 10% of the estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund for future spending in each of the following: open space, historic resources, and community housing. Additionally, 4% of the estimated annual revenues of the CPA will be set aside for funding administrative and operational expenses, and the amount will be set aside for interest expense on debt. The balance of the annual CPA revenue will be held as a reserve balance, which can be used for any legitimate CPA purpose at future town meetings.
Thank you. I'm not seeing requests for any speakers. We're going to call up on the screen the vote for Article 16H. Article 16H, and it's a majority vote, and town meeting members will have 30 seconds in which to vote. You'll see it on the screen. You can vote now. You're voting on Article 16H. We have a motion. So we're going to continue with the town meeting warrant after we complete 16H. We'll be moving again. 17 was in the consent agenda. 18 was withdrawn. 19, no motion, no action. We'll continue with Article 20. Once the voting concludes on 16H, town meeting is continuing in its third session. The voting has ended. We'll now see the total and whether it's a majority vote. It is 1808 voting in favor, 9 in opposition, 2 abstentions. It carries. We're going to be moving to 20 as you watch the precincts and how your town meeting members voted. Town meeting members will be confirming whether their vote was correct. While we do that, Mr. Canty moves the town vote to amend the Town of Plymouth general bylaws by creating a new section entitled Industrial Building Demolition Permit that establishes a process to review demolition activities related to large-scale industrial buildings that is of such scale that special conditioning may be necessary in order to avoid possible objectionable negative effects, such as heavy equipment noise, vibration, dust, or vehicular traffic to town ways, abutting properties, the environment, and the town in general, as on file with the town clerk. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 12 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 20. The focus of this bylaw is to ensure conditions are in place to minimize the negative effects of the demolition of the closed Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, and all other large-scale industrial structures will be subject to this bylaw. Approval of the article will give the town some oversight of the demolition process and allow some control for adding conditions such as specific traffic routes and limiting travel during sensitive times, but not limited to minimizing the negative effects of heavy vehicle traffic, noise, vibration, and dust to the surrounding neighborhoods and to the greater town. Thank you.
Lee Hartman is the Director of Planning and Development, followed by Precinct 7, Randolph Parker. Good evening, Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development.
Good evening, town meeting. So just to add a couple of other things, there is only one other building in the town that could be subject to this if it ever was to seek demolition, and that's the Smart Pack building that's on Grissom Road. We should keep in mind that this demolition and decommissioning process is going to be over the course of 2 decades. So this bylaw is really being put in place to give the residents of Manomet some protection as this large facility is demolished and decommissioned, so that we control the hours of operation, dust, noise, vibration on the site. And then if there are truck routes that may be traveling on town roads, that we can require mitigation for that truck routes and any damage they may do to town roads, as well as coordinate such things as bus traffic. So we have school bus routes in the area and being able to control those bus routes. So again, we hope you support this and give us some protection, which we don't have now. We're relying on the state and federal government to protect our interests, and this will just give us some local control over this very long and complicated process that is occurring at the power plant. Thank you.
Precinct 7, Randolph Parker. Mr. Parker, good evening. Plymouth Town Meeting, and welcome. This is the annual town meeting. We're in Article 20. Mr. Parker, please unmute yourself. You have speaking privileges. We welcome you this evening.
The moderator?
Good evening. We can hear you. Go ahead.
It's another miracle. Hang on.
Go ahead.
I'm going.
The timer's moving, Mr. Parker.
I'm not afraid, Steve.
I know you aren't.
You know,
go ahead.
I perceive a number of issues with this bylaw change.
it seems like we're adopting it for leverage with Pilgrim. And I think that's okay. But one has to wonder if it'll stand up to a challenge. Looking at the language, I said, well, how about a sunset provision? And decided, well, that won't work because it makes the inequity even more apparent. We could use one, though, because those knowing the original intent may be long gone, and future large industrial taxpayers will get to struggle with their projects too, in tandem with Pilgrim. The language says it's to protect our roads. The haul only involves Rocky Hill Road at most. But why would they bother? They own Powerhouse Road, from their State Road, the M Road, Route 3. Those are all state roads. It's not our problem. You know, trucks only get so big. There's more trips for sure, but on roads designed for the intensity. Neither do I see an appeal section in the language common to the other bylaws we know. This affects the entire light industrial district, not just the one in Manamat or the power plant, and that appears to be a little risky to me. There has to be a better way to gain some local control in the decommissioning process. I think the last thing we ought to do when Pilgrim is literally finally leaving us is hold them up. In the 90s, we adopted a bylaw that made their frontage along State Road 500 feet.
30 seconds.
To divide. They own something like 1,600 acres in Plymouth. I would suggest we think our options, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Precinct 4, David Peck on the motion. Mr. Peck, good evening.
My question for Lee Hartman, has this language been reviewed by town council? And are they happy with the language, and do they believe it's enforceable?
The answer is yes. Town council is here with me. We now have a motion to close debate.
Thank you.
I don't see any other speakers, so we don't need to act on that motion. Rather, we're going to go right to the motion and vote the main motion, the substantive motion, on whether to approve 20. We'll call it up on the screen. You'll have 30 seconds in which to vote, and it's voting now. You're voting on whether to create a new section entitled Industrial Building Demolition Permit. It is a majority vote. We'll be continuing in the warrant after town meeting members vote on this general bylaw proposal. It's in a motion. Town meeting members have been continuing throughout the evening. They are in their 4th hour now of the annual town meeting 3rd session. This is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. The voting concludes on Article 20. The results, 104 in favor, 11 no, 1 abstention. It carries. We're going through the precincts. As we do, we will read into the record motion number 21. And Mr. Canty moves the town vote to amend the general bylaws by inserting a new section, Chapter 164, entitled Stretch Energy Code, for the purpose of regulating the design and construction of buildings for the effective use of energy, pursuant to Appendix 115.AA of the Massachusetts Building Code 780 CMR, the Stretch Energy Code, including future additions, amendments, or modifications thereto, a copy of which is on file with the town clerk, as well as amend any other definitions, procedures, and provisions relative thereto. Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Good evening.
In a vote of 12-0 with 1 abstention, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 21. Adopting this new section, Chapter 164, entitled Stretch Energy Code, will put the town of Plymouth on the path to becoming a green community and work towards energy efficiency and energy savings in the town.
Thank you. Precinct for, we lost that request. So we're going to go to Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti. He is the Vice Chair of the Energy Committee, as well as being a town meeting member. Everett Malaguti, good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1 and Vice Chair of the Energy Committee. I'm here as part of the Energy Committee to advocate for this article, and I hope that all town meeting members approve this article. So the Stretch Energy Code, if we adopt this, will bring us one step closer to green communities. The last step is to just revamp our 20% energy reduction goal, which we received a grant through, I believe it's the Old Colony Planning Council, to start doing our baseline survey and our 5-year projection. The Stretch Energy Code, which most of town meeting remembers from roughly a decade ago, was voted down. And that was because it pertained to also renovations, additions, and the like to existing structures. The new Stretch Energy Code that we're voting on tonight does not have anything to do with renovations, additions, or the like. It is exempt from the Stretch Energy Code. It is only new buildings that are being erected and new commercial buildings of 100,000 square feet or larger, and buildings 40,000 square feet or larger that are conditioned spaces like malls, grocery stores, etc. It also does not have anything to do with some of the municipal buildings that may be built or buildings that will be retrofitted. I'm advocating on this article to save Plymouth money. This article will allow the town to receive a designation grant of roughly $267,000 to help the town with needed infrastructure for energy cost efficiency and life cycle costs for buildings to extend the taxpayer dollar further without burdening the taxpayer.
Thank you.
This will help the town. If I may, Steve, could I request a 1-minute extension?
Go ahead, Mr. Malaguti.
Thank you. With this, besides the benefits for the taxpayer of the reduction in energy cost, preserving the taxpayer dollar, it will also further the town to help with its building infrastructure, as well as creating a better community for Plymouth to live in by reducing carbon emissions, as well as preserving the character and integrity that Plymouth has worked so hard to maintain as a community that is eco-driven. Thank you, and I hope for your support.
Precinct 4, Jean Patino Lane. Good evening, Jean Patino Lane, Precinct 4. We're debating.
Hi, I tried to get your attention after the vote went down, but I didn't get my yes vote recorded on number 20, Article 20.
Yes vote on number 20. That's Jean
And it
Patino
wasn't-
Lane. Thank you. And while we're at it, also Ashley Sullivan on Article 9B2 voted yes. Those are 2 corrections. We're continuing on number 21. I'm not seeing any other speakers. Dan Gorsica is Precinct 13. Good evening, Daniel Gorsica on Article 21.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Dan Gorska, Precinct 13. Is there anyone from the building department of the town of Plymouth that can confirm some of the things that were just presented to us? Specifically, my read on the new stretch code and the information that I've gathered is that if you are doing an addition or a renovation to an existing structure, that indeed the building code and therefore de facto the stretch code needs to be met as part of that addition or renovation.
We'll go to Melissa Arrighi, the town manager, to respond to Daniel Gorsica, and she can indicate whether or not there's a department head who would be speaking on Article 21. This is Plymouth's annual town meeting. It's coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. Melissa Arrighi is the town manager. Good evening. Town manager Melissa Arrighi. And we will be continuing to go through the annual town meeting warrant this evening. We're scheduled to conclude at 10. If need be, we could extend beyond the 10 o'clock hour. Town meeting members are debating Article 21 in the warrant. We have a question from Daniel Gorsica to be followed by Precinct 12 Edward Russell. We're looking for Melissa Arrighi. She is our town manager. If we don't have her, why don't we go to Precinct 12 Edward Russell, and then we'll come back to the town manager. So let's go to Precinct 12 Edward Russell. Good evening, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Steve. I don't need to say more than the fact.
You'll need to speak up, Mr. Russell.
Can you hear me? All right, I've unmuted.
Go ahead.
Through the years that we have not done anything on the green communities, we've lost a lot of money, and the town of Kingston's collected over $1 million through this, and we've got to do something. That's all.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Holly States, and Holly is a member of the committee working on this. Let's go to Holly States, who's on the panel. Good evening, Holly States.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can respond to Dan's question.
Thank you.
The Stretch Energy Code does not apply to additions or renovations. It is an amendment to the building code, and it does not apply to additions or renovations.
Thank you. Mr. Gorsica, does that satisfy your question?
In all due respect to everybody, I have an email from the building commissioner stating that additions must meet the new building code, including the energy stretch code. And that's why I'm asking if there's the building commissioner or anyone on town hall that could just answer the question, because candidly, I understand there's money to be had here, but if I understand the revenues that are brought to by these grants is applied to work that we have to do. So it would be us wanting to spend money and then apply for a grant to get partial funding. So again, I'm in favor of being green and being energy efficient. I just want people to understand that, in my opinion, based on the information I have gathered, if you do an addition to your house, you will therefore need to meet the energy stretch code. And again, if there's someone, a town official or the building commissioner that could either confirm or deny, that would be greatly appreciated.
We're going to finish with this speaker getting a response, and then I have multiple motions to close debate. Melissa Arrighi, town manager, good evening.
So good evening. Thanks for waiting for me. I can't respond exactly to that, though. As I recall, when this was presented to the select board, that same question came up about additions, and I thought we had answered it at that time. But as we move on, I'm going to try and reach out to Paul right now and see if I can get a definitive answer on that.
Unfortunately, we have a motion to close debate. We'll see how town meeting decides how they want to handle that. Colleen Coughlin moves to close debate. We'll remove her name from the list. We'll also remove Mr. Votrain, and you'll see those who still care to be heard. Before we take a vote on closing debate, Amy Little Hine has a point of order. Amy, what is your point of order? She's in Precinct 14. Precinct 14, Amy Little Hine. Point of order?
Yes, I don't know if this is actually a point of order, but can we move this motion, or can we move this article till the end to debate until we can get it?
No. Unfortunately, I first have to take the motion as to whether to close debate. I've already recognized that. So we're going to first decide whether to close debate on this. It is 2/3. It's not debatable. And we're going to put it up on the screen. It's a procedural motion. I'll then come to Amy Little Hine if we vote not to close debate. You can begin voting now. You have 30 seconds in which to vote as to whether to close debate on Article 21. This is a motion to adopt a new section in the general bylaws entitled Stretch Energy Code. It is a majority vote, and town meeting members are now voting on whether to close debate and vote on the main motion coming before you. This is a procedural vote right now on whether to close debate. It requires 2/3 vote. Town meeting members have voted. We're now going to look at the totals. 65 say yes, 55 say no, 0 abstentions. So it does not carry by 2/3. We continue to debate, and now Amy Little Hine, so that wasn't a point of order, but it could be a motion. She wants to move to change the order of the articles to have Article 21 follow Article 29. It is a motion to change the order. It's a 2/3 vote. Amy Little Hine, do you care to be heard on your motion to change the order?
Yes, I think it's important that we get the answer before we vote on this because I think it's crucial to know if it will apply to additions to homes.
Okay, so I see multiple people wanting to speak. You can be recognized on whether you wish to speak to change the order. All right, we're going to go to Melissa Arrighi, who has the building commissioner on the phone. Melissa Arrighi, good evening.
Thank you. Sorry about that delay. I have Paul on the phone, and this does not apply to additions. This is only new construction. And Dan, I don't know why you had that wrong information, but Paul will follow up with an email to you and can confirm that's the case. And he actually thought he had expressed that to you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Amy Little Hine. Amy, do you still wish to change the order of the articles?
I do not.
Thank you. That's withdrawn. We're now going to go back to our speakers list. I'm going to begin with Precinct 11, Joseph Trishelli, to speak on the motion. Good evening, Joseph Trishelli.
I withdraw my my motion to speak.
Thank you. We're going to move to Andrew Loretz. Moves to close debate. We'll take him off the screen and we'll show the speakers queue. This is a motion to close debate on Article 21. It is not debatable, requires a 2/3 vote. We're now going to do the procedural motion on whether to close debate on Article 21. It is a procedural vote, and we're going to be looking for it up on the screen as to a procedural motion to close debate. Town meeting is in the annual town meeting. They are in Article 21. It has to do with the Stretch Energy Code, and we're going to look on the screen for the here we go. Close debate, 30 seconds, vote now. You're going to see the timer. Yes, you can start to vote. Town meeting has been meeting now for 3 sessions. We're in the 4th hour of our 3rd evening. Town meeting members have voted for an adjourned session tomorrow if needed. However, they are on Article 21. They're voting whether to close debate on Article 21. We have another hour, another 40 minutes before we would take another recess. The voting ends on whether to close debate. And the results, 106 say yes, 14 no, 0 abstentions. We've closed debate. No more speakers on Article 21. We're going to go right to the vote on the substantive motion under Article 21, whether to adopt a Stretch Energy Code. We'll show the vote up on the screen so that town meeting members can vote with a timer. And it's a majority vote for this particular article. Town meeting members will vote on whether to adopt a Stretch Energy Code, a change to our bylaws. This is coming to you. Here it is. Vote now. You have 30 seconds in which to vote. This is going to complete Article 21, and then we will continue with the warrant that has been presented to town meeting members. We're here live at PAC TV Studios with Julie Thompson, the Executive Director, Town Council Mark Rich, Assistant Moderator Nicole Manfredi, and representatives from OTI Technology, all of whom have been supporting this virtual town meeting by remote participation. Here's the vote coming up to you. The results, 103 say yes, 16 no, 1 abstention. The motion carries. We now have a new bylaw on the Stretch Energy Code. As we moved to Article 22, we'll look at the precincts, see how your town meeting members voted. Article 22 is withdrawn. Article 23 is withdrawn. Article 24 is a motion from Mr. Candy of the Advisory and Finance Committee, who moves the town vote to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of the parcel listed below as on file with the town clerk. It is off Peter Rose. You have the parcel ID, you have the legal reference, and we'll hear from Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. A good evening, Kevin Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In a vote of 12-0 with 1 abstention, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 24. The Open Space Committee considers this 8.45 acre plot of forested habitat highly valuable and worth protecting. A parcel off Peter Road abuts 22 acres of protected open space land and is in the vicinity of 2 other lots that are under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission that provide wildlife habitats and opportunities for human recreation.
Thank you. We're going to begin Precinct 3. Donna Curtin has a point of order. Donna Curtin, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Donna Curtin, Precinct 3. My vote was not recorded on Article 21. It was yes.
It was yes. And again, thank you, Donna Curtin, for your participation following the recess on the recognition of the centennial of women's right to vote. We appreciate that contribution to this town meeting. We're now going to go to Precinct 7, Randolph Parker. Good evening, Mr. Parker.
Good evening again, Mr. Drifletti. Is this parcel, when it's transferred to the commission, going to be conservation restricted?
The motion says to the Conservation Commission for conservation purposes. That's what the motion says, and it's a 2/3 vote. Does that answer your question?
Well, that's okay. My concern is I'm told that there's some property being blocked off at Briggs Estate on the argument that it's conservation restricted. I think people ought to be able to use these open spaces too, and I'll support this, but thank you, Mr. Drifletti.
Thank you. I have a motion to close debate by Donald Williams. Precinct 8 is to no longer have debate. We'll call up the queue. Town meeting members can see who still wishes to be heard, and this is a procedural motion. Let's show the queue to town meeting members. I can tell you there is one town meeting member who is on the speakers list. It is Precinct 12, Edward Russell. So now we can go directly to the motion to close the debate. It is a procedural motion. Town meeting members can vote when they see it on the screen, and I call the timer. It is a procedural motion to close debate on Article 24. This is town meeting coming to you. Vote now. You have 30 seconds in which to vote, and the timer is now turning. Town meeting members are deciding whether or not to continue to debate Article 24 or whether to end debate and vote on the substantive motion. Has to do with the transfer, care, custody, management, and control of a parcel off of Peter Road. Less than 8 seconds in which to vote. Town meeting members use this parliamentary procedure when they want to decide whether to end the debate. It's a 2/3 vote. We're waiting for the results. 108 say yes, 11 still want to debate, 0 abstain. It carries. We're now going to go, we're not going to show through precincts because it's procedural. Rather, we're going to go to the substantive motion on Article 24, and they're going to vote on Article 24. They're now voting on the substantive motion. It is a 2/3 vote as to whether to approve this transfer of the care, custody, management, and control of the parcel off of Peter Road, parcel ID 108-000-010-020. And we're looking for on the screen the motion that we're going to be voting. Here it is. You'll have 30 seconds when we see the timer. Vote now. You're voting on Article. They need 1 moment. I'm sorry. We'll come back to that. Town meeting members, you will be voting on, again, the motion under Article 24. Here it is again. And we need the timer. 30 seconds. You can vote now. Town meeting members, it's a 2/3 quantum of vote on this particular article because it's the transfer of the care, custody, and management of a certain parcel. And we'll continue with the town meeting warrant following the vote on Article 24. It is a 2/3 vote. This is coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18th, Plymouth Annual Town Meeting. We've completed the special town meeting. It's been dissolved. We're in the warrant on the annual. The voting ends on Article 24, waiting for the results. 115 say yes, 3 say no, 1 abstention. It carries by more than 2/3. We will now scroll through the precincts. We have 15 precincts. You'll see how your town meeting member voted. Why we do that, Article 25, I have no motion. Declaring no motion, I have no action. Article 26, I have no motion. Declaring no motion, I have no action. Article 27, I have no motion. No motion, I declare no action. Article 28, I have no motion, therefore I declare no action. Article 29, I have no motion, therefore I declare no action. We're seeing the last vote on Article 24. At this time, we're going to be receiving a motion to dissolve. Before we do that, again, one more time, special thanks on this first virtual town meeting by remote participation. I want to thank Assistant Town Moderator Nicole Manfredi. She's worked hard for several months now, putting together the training for all of you to participate. Thanks to PAC TV. They've put in countless hours to support us, as well as OTI Technologies, who have been here throughout town meeting to help us with the voting. Thanks to all the town officials, not only those on the panel, but those who have worked to put together this town meeting. Special thanks to the Advisory and Finance Committee, to Kevin Canty as chair, and to Jeanette White, who works, again, tirelessly to help put together the books and the motions for all of us. And town meeting members, I want to give you special thanks for your patience through all of this. It's not been easy for many of you to try something new in order to get the business of the town of Plymouth completed, but you've done it. You've done it successfully. You've had high attendance and levels of participation. You are all to be congratulated for getting your votes in and getting them done and having a good debate. We're going to be viewing and reflecting upon what's happened. We welcome your feedback as we look forward to the upcoming fall town meeting, which is going to be in a couple of months, not too far away. The warrant has closed. There will not be multiple declarations continuing town meeting. Rather, unless the state of emergency changes, I will be making a request to the select board that the next town meeting also be by remote participation under the statute until the governor changes the state of emergency. That will be my request. I'll be looking for feedback from town meeting members. And at this time, Kevin Canty moves to dissolve this annual town meeting. And at this time, I don't see that there's anyone asking to be heard on the motion to dissolve. So we'll put it up on the screen, and town meeting members will get a chance to vote on whether to dissolve the annual town meeting. You'll see, and it's a majority vote, there'll be a timer. You'll have 30 seconds in which to vote. The voting begins now. Town meeting members are voting on whether to dissolve the annual town meeting. This has been coming to you live on Tuesday, August 18. This is the third and final session of the annual town meeting. It has been occurring in many places throughout the town and elsewhere in New England, most notably at PAC TV Studios, at Town Hall, and at Plymouth North High School. Thanks to all who have been contributing throughout this town meeting. You'll see the vote on the motion to dissolve. It is going to be shown 110 voting in favor, 2 vote no, 0 abstentions. You'll be able to check the records if you choose on this procedural motion to dissolve, but this annual town meeting is dissolved at 9:31 p.m. Good evening, and thank you to all of you for joining us. We're getting not virtual claps, but real claps here in the studio. You'll see the town meeting members are shown by precinct. Good day, and we'll see you very soon in October. Thank you.